Welcome, brave souls, to another journey into the darkest corners of our world. Tonight, we leave the streets behind and enter the cold, echoing halls of New York's most infamous prisons, places where walls whisper secrets of despair, suffering, and restless spirits. From clanging gates to empty cells that still smell of anguish, these penitentiaries hold stories that refuse to stay buried. Whether you're a thrill seeker, a lover of history, or a believer in the paranormal, prepare yourself. The air grows colder, the corridors darker, and the shadows longer. These are the 25 haunted prisons in New York that whisper through the walls. Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York, has long stood as one of the most infamous prisons in America. Built in 1825 along the banks of the Hudson River, its thick stone walls have contained thousands of the state's most dangerous criminals. But behind those walls lies more than a record of human punishment and rehabilitation. There are whispers of something darker, echoes of anguish that have outlived the men who once filled its cells. From the moment one approaches the grounds of Sing Sing, an eerie chill seems to settle in the air. The river mist clings to the outer walls like a veil, and the sound of distant trains mixes with something less identifiable. Murmurs, perhaps, or faint cries that seem to come from nowhere. Guards, visitors, and even contractors who've worked inside the facility all tell of strange, unexplainable experiences. They describe icy cold spots that linger in certain hallways, footsteps echoing when no one else is near, and sudden drafts that smell faintly of iron and sweat. The prison's haunted reputation is rooted deeply in its brutal history. For nearly 2 centuries, Sing Sing has seen every facet of human despair: executions, riots, solitary confinement, and the silent torment of those who never made it out alive. Between 1891 and 1963, over 600 men and women were executed here in the prison's electric chair, grimly nicknamed Old Sparky. Each of them took their final breath in a small chamber where witnesses would gather behind glass, the hum of electricity filling the room before the smell of burning flesh took over. Guards who have patrolled that part of the prison long after executions ceased say they still hear the faint buzz of electricity at night. Some claim that on quiet evenings, when the wind is just right, the flicker of phantom light can be seen from under the old execution room door. Others have reported the unmistakable sound of a man's final gasp, quick, sharp, and followed by silence so heavy it feels alive. In the older cell blocks, built in the 19th century, strange shadows are known to appear along the stone walls. Several guards have reported seeing the figure of a man in tattered prison clothes walking the corridor near cell block D, only to vanish when approached. Sometimes he's seen holding something in his hands, a Bible, or perhaps a folded letter, and his lips move as though reciting a prayer. No one has ever identified him, but many believe he could be one of the early inmates who died during the prison's construction, when the work itself was punishment. Those prisoners, chained together and forced to quarry the very stone that built their confinement, labored in conditions so harsh that dozens perished before the first cell was even finished. Even visitors who come for guided historical tours speak of feeling uneasy. One woman recounted standing near an old solitary cell when her phone suddenly shut off. The air grew colder, and she heard what sounded like faint sobbing echoing from the walls. Another visitor described feeling a sharp tug on her sleeve as she peered into an empty cell, as though someone invisible was desperate to be noticed. When she turned, there was no one there, only a cold draft seeping from the darkness. Former employees often tell of a particular corridor, known among staff as the Hallway of Echoes. It's said that during the overnight shifts, guards can hear faint conversations drifting through the air, low voices speaking in fragments, names, numbers, or simple words like please. Some have even heard what sounds like the rattling of chains, though no such restraints have been used there for decades. Attempts to explain these sounds through pipes or ventilation have come up empty. One long-serving correctional officer once confessed that he refused to walk certain sections of the prison after midnight. He claimed that several times he had heard a rhythmic tapping metal against metal coming from an empty cell. On one occasion, the sound grew louder as he approached, only to stop completely when he opened the door. Inside was nothing but a folded uniform neatly placed on the bunk, though no one had been assigned to that cell for years. Psychologists who have studied the atmosphere of old prisons, like Sing Sing, often point out that intense human emotional guilt, rage, despair can leave an impression, like a psychic residue. The walls absorb it, and sometimes it seems to echo back, in a place where hundreds died violently and thousands more suffered in silence. It's not hard to imagine why some energy might remain behind. But others believe there's more to it than memory. Paranormal investigators, who've been allowed limited access to the facility, describe capturing unexplained electronic voice phenomena. One recording, taken near the site of the old execution chamber, captured a male voice whispering what sounded like, "I'm still here." Another investigator reported sudden battery drains and temperature drops during their equipment setup, common signs, they claim, of supernatural presence. Even some of the modern inmates have reported experiences they can't explain. One former prisoner recounted in an interview that late one night, while lying on his bunk, he felt the mattress dip beside him as if someone had sat down. He said he could smell smoke and hear faint breathing. When he opened his eyes, there was no one there, but the air around him felt charged, almost electric. Another inmate claimed he heard a man's voice reciting scripture from a nearby cell, though that section of the block had been empty for months. The Hudson River itself adds to the unsettling atmosphere. Its constant presence beyond the prison's walls acts as a reminder of both freedom and finality. Mist rises from the water at dawn, drifting through the old graveyard where unclaimed inmates were buried beneath simple markers. Visitors who have wandered near the cemetery late in the evening have reported seeing dim lantern-like lights hovering between the headstones, moving slowly as though guided by unseen hands. Some locals believe these lights are the restless souls of the executed, searching for peace they were denied in life. Today, Sing Sing remains an active correctional facility, a place where past and present coexist uneasily. Its reputation for discipline and rehabilitation stands alongside its legacy of pain and punishment. Yet, despite modern upgrades and security systems, no one can quite shake the feeling that the ghosts of the past are still there watching, waiting, and whispering through the cracks of time. Clinton Correctional Facility, known to most as Danny Mora, rises out of the northern New York landscape like a relic of another era. Surrounded by forest and mountains, the gray stone walls stand cold and imposing, their watchtowers peering out across the quiet town below. Inside those walls, countless men have lived, suffered, and died since the prison's opening in 1845. Over the years, stories have spread that some of them never truly left. Guards, inmates, and even visitors all describe the same eerie feeling that something unseen moves within the prison's corridors. The air inside Dannemora is heavy, and the silence feels alive. After lights out, the cell blocks take on a different atmosphere altogether. Footsteps echo where no one is walking, doors slam without warning, and shadows pass across the walls, shifting as though guided by something invisible. Those who work the night shift often say the building has moods. Some nights it feels calm, almost peaceful. But on others, an unease settles through the halls, a thick, oppressive energy that makes even seasoned officers glance over their shoulders. It's during those nights that the strange occurrences seem to multiply. Cold spots appear suddenly in warm rooms. Lights flicker, and voices whisper in the dark, speaking words no one can understand. The oldest parts of the prison are said to be the most active. In Cell Block D, where prisoners once endured months of solitary confinement, guards frequently report seeing figures pacing behind the bars of empty cells. The forms appear solid in the dim light, their heads bowed, their movements slow and deliberate. When approached, they vanish without a sound. One officer swore he saw a man dressed in an outdated uniform leaning against a cell door one night. Thinking it was an inmate out of place, he called out, but the figure simply faded, leaving behind a cold draft that lingered long after. Inmates have their own stories. Some claim to wake in the night to find someone standing near their beds, silent and unmoving. Others speak of hearing faint cries echoing through the cell blocks, the sound of men in pain. calling for help that never comes. The most unsettling tales describe shadowy figures that walk the tiers after midnight, their footsteps steady and rhythmic, like guards on patrol from another century. A few prisoners say these figures vanish when confronted, as though melting into the air itself. Dannemoro's violent past may explain why these stories persist. The prison's early years were defined by brutality and despair. Inmates were forced into hard labor under freezing conditions, and punishment for disobedience was severe. Executions were carried out on site, often in secret, and the bodies buried nearby. Over the decades, riots, murders, and failed escape attempts left their mark on the prison's history. Locals began to say that the souls of those who died inside its walls had nowhere else to go. The infirmary is another place steeped in fear. Guards have reported hearing the clatter of medical instruments and the soft shuffle of footsteps, even when the room is empty. One former nurse claims she once saw a man sitting upright on a hospital bed, his face pale and expressionless. When she blinked, he was gone. Later, she discovered that the bed where he appeared had belonged to an inmate who died there decades earlier. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site describe it as one of the most active places in the Northeast. During one investigation, electronic voice recorders captured faint sounds resembling moans and whispered pleas. Thermal cameras revealed human-shaped cold spots moving across otherwise empty rooms. In one particularly chilling recording, a low male voice could be heard saying, "Still here," followed by the metallic clank of chains. Even the officers who dismiss talk of ghosts admit there are things about Dannemora they can't explain. Many say they feel watched while walking alone, as if dozens of unseen eyes follow their every move. Some have caught glimpses of motion in their peripheral vision, a flicker of light, or the outline of a person just out of sight. The sound of boots on concrete is common, echoing through hallways where no one walks. The feeling of being watched isn't limited to staff. Visitors to the facility often describe an inexplicable chill when passing through the gates. Some claim the very walls seem to hum, as though holding on to centuries of voices. A few have even reported feeling light touches on their arms or shoulders. Gentle, but unmistakable, as if someone unseen were reaching out. Dannemora's history continues to add to its haunted reputation. The infamous 2015 escape, in which 2 inmates tunneled out through the walls and fled into the surrounding woods, brought renewed attention to the prison. During the manhunt that followed, several officers reported hearing strange noises within the empty corridors, footsteps, murmuring voices, and the faint jingle of keys. Some believed the chaos had stirred up the old energy that lay dormant within the building, reawakening spirits long forgotten. Today, Clinton Correctional Facility remains in operation, housing hundreds of inmates. But despite modern renovations and new technology, the hauntings persist. Those who work there say it is impossible to spend years inside those walls and not feel the weight of the place. The stone seems to remember every scream, every desperate plea, every last breath. Auburn Correctional Facility in Auburn, New York, stands as one of the oldest and most storied prisons in the United States. Built in 1818, its walls have seen more than 2 centuries of confinement, punishment, and death. The prison was the birthplace of the infamous Auburn system, a strict model of silence and labor that influenced penal institutions across the nation. Inmates worked in complete quiet, ate in silence, and slept in cells that seemed to swallow light. Over the decades, the facility became a place where human suffering was institutionalized, many believe, where restless spirits found no release. Even from the outside, Auburn has an oppressive presence. Its high stone walls loom over the streets, darkened by time and weather. The iron gates creak open with a sound that echoes like a groan, and the corridors inside are narrow, lined with cells that have held countless lives. The air feels thick, heavy with age and memory. Visitors and staff alike describe a sense of dread that seems to intensify the longer one remains within. Some attribute it to the architecture and history. Others say it's something far less explainable. The prison's long record of punishment includes some of the earliest executions in American history. Auburn was home to the first electric chair execution in 1890. when a man named William Kemmler was put to death in a process that went horribly wrong. The electricity failed to kill him instantly, forcing multiple surges before he finally died. Witnesses at the time called it a gruesome scene, and even the doctors present were shaken by what they had seen. Since that day, the chamber where it happened has been a focal point for strange activity. Guards who patrol near it late at night report hearing faint electrical humming, as though the current still flows through unseen wires. Some have even heard muffled cries and gasps, echoes of that horrific moment when the new technology turned death into spectacle. In the cell blocks, the haunting presence is said to be stronger. The sound of dragging chains has been heard along the floors when no inmates are nearby. Footsteps echo down the hallways, slow and deliberate, often following those who walk alone. Some guards say that when they turn to look, they catch only a glimpse of movement, a dark shadow slipping into a cell that has long been empty. One officer once claimed that while making rounds in the early hours of the morning, he heard the distinct sound of someone breathing behind him. When he turned, there was no one there, but the air around him felt icy, and his flashlight flickered out. Visitors touring the facility as part of historical programs have described their own unsettling experiences. One woman said she saw a man sitting quietly on a bunk in one of the cells, staring straight ahead. She assumed he was part of the staff reenactment until she blinked and he was gone. Another visitor reported hearing a voice whisper her name as she passed through the lower level, even though she was at the back of the group. The sound was faint but unmistakable, carried on the cold draft that seems to inhabit the prison year-round. There are also stories of unseen prisoners that appear during the quietest hours of the night. Guards stationed near cell block A have seen pale faces peering from behind the bars, only to vanish when approached. Others have reported hearing the faint clink of tin cups against the metal doors, a desperate rhythm as if someone were still trying to be heard. One longtime corrections officer recalled hearing what sounded like a group of men murmuring prayers in the dark. The voices rose together, then faded into silence, leaving him alone in the corridor. Auburn's history is filled with tragedy, and not all of it was confined to inmates. Several guards lost their lives during riots and escape attempts. Their spirits, too, are said to remain within the walls. One of the most well-known apparitions is that of a uniformed officer seen walking near the main gate. He's described as tall, wearing an old-style uniform with brass buttons that glint faintly, even in low light. When approached, he turns his head as if to acknowledge the living, then fades away before reaching the next corner. The basement areas of the prison are particularly notorious. Used for storage now, they were once solitary cells where inmates were confined in near darkness for days at a time. The thick air down there carries a damp, metallic odor, and even experienced staff refuse to linger. People who have ventured below report feeling sudden waves of nausea and disorientation. Cameras malfunction, lights dim unexpectedly, and some claim to hear low whispers rising from the walls themselves. One former maintenance worker swore that while he was repairing a pipe, he felt a cold hand rest on his shoulder. Thinking it was a colleague, he turned around, but he was alone. The infirmary is another place that seems charged with residual energy. During Auburn's earlier years, medical procedures were often crude and experimental. Inmates suffering from illness or injury were treated with little compassion, and many died under harsh conditions. Today, staff walking through the infirmary at night hear the rustle of sheets and the faint sound of coughing. Some have seen the outline of a man lying on one of the beds, only for the shape to dissolve when they approach. There is a story passed quietly among officers about the silent man. He is described as wearing a 19th-century prison uniform, his face gaunt and hollow. He's most often seen sitting on a bunk with his hands folded, staring blankly ahead. Unlike other apparitions, he never moves or reacts to those who see him. Guards who encounter him say that after he vanishes, the cell remains colder than the rest for hours. Some believe he represents the countless inmates who lived and died under the rule of enforced silence, the physical embodiment of the Auburn system itself. Psychologists and historians often attribute these sightings to the weight of the prison's atmosphere and its violent legacy. They argue that constant exposure to suffering and fear leaves a mark on the environment, one that sensitive people interpret as paranormal activity. But for those who have worked there, the feeling goes beyond explanation. The echoes, the whispers, the fleeting glimpses, they feel too real, too immediate to be dismissed as imagination. Outside the prison walls, the town of Auburn lives in quiet coexistence with its infamous neighbor. Locals speak of strange noises on still nights, when the wind carries the faint clang of metal or a distant voice calling from behind the walls. Lights sometimes flicker along the old watchtowers, even when they're unmanned. It's as if the prison itself never truly sleeps. Clinton Prison's Dannemora Annex, a lesser-known but deeply unsettling part of the massive correctional complex in northern New York, holds stories that few dare to speak aloud. Nestled in the remote wilderness of Clinton County, the annex was originally built as an overflow unit for the main Clinton Correctional Facility, but over time, it developed a dark reputation, all its own, a place where reality seems to bend, where sounds echo from unseen sources, and where some say not everyone who enters ever truly leaves. The structure itself is stark and cold, constructed of gray stone and steel, surrounded by pine forest and perpetual mist. At night, the air grows unnaturally still around the building, broken only by the low hum of the distant main prison and the cry of wind sweeping down from the Adirondacks. Guards who work there often describe a sense of isolation unlike anywhere else, as though the walls themselves are alive with memory. Some have said that once the heavy doors close behind you, the air feels different, thick, electric, and watching. For decades, the Dannemora Annex has been the source of whispered rumors among prison staff. Some speak of prisoners who vanished without explanation, records that show inmates transferred or released, even though no one remembers the paperwork being filed. Others recall hearing names called over the intercom, names belonging to men who died years before. Maintenance workers tell of entering empty rooms only to find footprints in the dust, or tools that shift positions when their backs are turned. Paranormal investigators who've been granted access to the annex report chilling evidence. Electronic voice phenomena (FEPs) have been recorded in abundance. In one recording, a faint voice can be heard moaning from the far end of an empty corridor. In another, captured near a disused cell block, a burst of static gives way to a whisper that sounds like laughter, high-pitched, distorted, and distant, as though coming from behind the walls themselves. Even seasoned investigators have admitted feeling uneasy, describing sudden temperature drops and the overwhelming sensation of being watched by something unseen. The annex's unsettling energy is often attributed to its past. In the early 20th century, when the prison system was overcrowded and resources stretched thin, the annex served as a site for disciplinary isolation. Inmates sent there were often considered beyond rehabilitation, violent, unstable, or mentally broken. The cells were small, the light dim, and silence was enforced. Men spent days, weeks, sometimes months, alone with their thoughts, surrounded by darkness. Some never emerged alive. Records from that era mention unexplained deaths, suicides, heart failures, and accidents that defied logic. One former officer who worked the annex in the 1970s recalled a night he will never forget. During rounds, he heard a door creak open down the hall. Assuming it was another guard or an inmate trying to get attention, he went to investigate. The corridor was empty. As he approached one of the cells, he felt a rush of cold air pass over him, and the heavy iron door swung shut behind him with a deafening clang. His flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment, he swore he saw a figure standing in the cell opposite, tall, thin, and motionless. When the light steadied, the figure was gone. It took two other officers to pry the door open minutes later. They found him pale and shaking, his breath visible even in the warm air. Other guards share similar experiences, hearing soft knocks from inside empty cells, the sound of chains dragging across the floor, or the faint murmur of voices whispering just beyond understanding. Some say these whispers seem to call names, sometimes their own. The annex's security cameras have also captured inexplicable footage. Doors opening slowly on their own, shadows moving against the light, and in one case, what appeared to be the faint outline of a human form passing through a solid wall. There are also legends of prisoners who disappeared without trace. One of the most persistent stories involves an inmate named Robert C., who was housed in the annex in the late 1930s. He was serving time for armed robbery and was known for his defiant attitude. One morning, during routine head count, guards discovered his cell empty. The door was locked from the outside, the windows sealed with bars. A search of the entire facility turned up nothing. His file was quietly marked as escapee, though no evidence of escape was ever found. Decades later, several guards claimed to have seen a man matching his description, walking the upper tier of the annex. They described him wearing an outdated uniform, his head bowed, his hands cuffed in front of him. When approached, he faded into the shadows. Another chilling account comes from a janitor who worked in the annex during the 1990s. Late one night, while cleaning the corridors, he noticed a cell door slightly ajar. Thinking it had been left open by mistake, he went to close it. As he reached for the handle, the door slammed shut on its own with such force that it bent the metal latch. Startled, he turned to run but stopped when he heard laughter echoing behind him. The sound was faint at first, then grew louder, bouncing off the walls in a way that made it impossible to tell where it came from. He left his cart and never returned to work there again. In the storage areas beneath the annex, strange occurrences are just as common. Boxes shift positions overnight, tools vanish only to reappear days later, and lights turn on when the power is cut. Workers who entered the basement claim to hear breathing in the dark or feel something brushing past their shoulders. One electrician described feeling a sudden blast of freezing air as he rewired an outlet. When he turned around, he saw condensation forming on the wall, as though someone had exhaled directly onto it. Experts have tried to rationalize the phenomena, citing drafts, vibration from machinery, or simple human stress, but the experiences persist. Even those who don't believe in ghosts admit that the Dannemora Annex feels different. It's like the building remembers. One officer said, "Every sound you hear could be something real or something left behind." The surrounding forest only adds to the sense of unease. Locals tell stories of hearing screams carried on the wind during heavy fog. Some claim to see lights moving through the trees near the annex at night, glowing faintly before fading away. Hunters avoid the area, saying it's cursed ground, tainted by years of pain and fear. In recent years, paranormal teams have returned again and again to study the activity, each leaving with more questions than answers. Their recordings capture laughter, moans, and distant shouts. Some report feeling tugged or touched, as if unseen hands were guiding them away from certain rooms. A few refuse to return after their first visit. Rikers Island Jail, sitting in the East River between the Bronx and Queens, is one of the most infamous correctional facilities in the United States. For over 80 years, it has housed some of New York City's most dangerous and desperate inmates. Behind its tall fences and razor wire, Rikers has seen violence, fear, and despair on a scale few places can match. But what many don't realize is that its dark history runs far deeper than human cruelty. Guards, inmates, and even visitors have long whispered about strange occurrences that can be explained: shadows that move without light, unseen hands that brush against skin, and voices that echo from empty cells. Before Rikers became a jail complex, the island itself carried a grim legacy. In the 19th century, it was used as a dumping ground for garbage and as a Potter's Field, a burial site for New York's unclaimed dead. Thousands of bodies were buried there in unmarked graves. Later, parts of the island were built over the remains, as if the city tried to bury not just bodies but memories. Some locals believe the restless spirits of those forgotten souls never left, and that their energy lingers beneath the concrete, influencing everything that happens above. From the moment Rikers opened as a correctional facility in 1932, tragedy and violence followed. Inmates died in riots, suicides, stabbings, and beatings. Guards were attacked, and the halls were often filled with screams. Over time, the stories of hauntings grew alongside the prison's reputation for brutality. Many officers who work the night shift have described an overwhelming sense of dread, like being watched by something that can't be seen. Some say it's simply the weight of the job. Others believe the island itself is cursed. Guards often speak of cold spots that seem to appear out of nowhere, areas where the temperature drops suddenly, even in the height of summer. One officer recalled walking through a hallway near the old solitary cells when he felt a chill run through him so intense that his breath became visible. When he turned around, he saw a faint shadow standing at the end of the corridor, and still, he called out, thinking it was another officer, but the figure didn't move. When he took a step closer, it vanished. Similar accounts have circulated for decades. Late-night patrols often bring reports of whispering voices echoing through the blocks, sometimes calling out names, sometimes laughing faintly, as though mocking the living. The most unsettling part, guards say, is when those voices seem to come from empty cells. Doors rattle on their own, and unseen footsteps follow those who walk alone. Radios crackle with static, and sometimes, deep within the noise, a voice can be heard saying words that no one on duty has spoken. Inmates, to tell stories of things that defy reason. Some claim to have seen figures standing near the yard fence after lights out, figures that don't belong to any living prisoner. These shadowy shapes drift across the yard, pacing slowly before fading into the darkness. Others describe hearing moans late at night, long after the noise of the day has died down, or feeling the sensation of someone sitting on the edge of their bunk when no one is there. A few even report waking to the sound of chains dragging across the floor, echoing softly like ghosts, marching through the tiers. One of the most repeated stories involves a section of the facility known as the old dorms, part of the original construction now largely unused. Officers assigned there say the lights flicker for no reason, doors open by themselves, and cold drafts sweep through the hallways even when no vents are running. A few have claimed to hear the cries of someone shouting, "Help me," from inside a sealed room. When they open the door, the sound stops instantly, leaving only silence. Paranormal investigators who have studied Rikers Island believe the activity is fueled by the sheer concentration of suffering that has taken place there. The energy of fear, anger, and hopelessness seems to have soaked into the walls. Some describe it as a psychic echo, an imprint left behind by decades of pain. During one unofficial investigation by former city employees, audio recorders captured faint voices whispering phrases like "get out" and "don't look." In another, a security camera reportedly filmed a hazy figure moving across an empty corridor after lockdown, its outline flickering like smoke before disappearing through a wall. There are also tales from the transportation tunnels beneath the complex. Guards who've escorted prisoners through those tunnels late at night report hearing footsteps that don't match their own. Some say they've seen reflections in the metal walls, faces staring back that don't belong to anyone present. A few refuse to work that route after dark, claiming that no matter how many times they check behind them, they can never shake the feeling that someone else is walking just out of sight. One chilling account comes from a former correctional officer who worked Rikers in the 1980s. During a routine patrol, he heard what sounded like a man sobbing from one of the isolation cells. When he approached, the crying stopped. He looked through the slot and saw an inmate sitting on the bed, head in hands. But when he opened the cell door, moments later, it was empty. The bed was unmade, the walls bare, and the air cold enough to sting his skin. The officer later learned that years earlier, an inmate had hanged himself in that same cell. Even medical staff have reported eerie happenings in the infirmary. Nurses tell of hearing stretchers rolling down the hall when no one is there, or the sudden sound of heart monitors beeping to life in rooms long unused. Some have seen the silhouette of a man in a hospital gown standing in the doorway, only for him to vanish when approached. One nurse described feeling a hand grip her wrist during a night shift, firm and cold, though she was completely alone. Outside the jail complex, the waters surrounding Rikers carry their own legends. Fishermen and ferry operators have reported strange lights glowing beneath the surface, especially on foggy nights. Some believe the spirits of those buried on the island long before the jail existed still linger, drawn to the movement of the tide. Others think the restless souls of inmates who died within the walls drift out to the river, unable to find peace. Despite modernization and constant change, the stories continue. Guards still talk about shadows that move independently of light. Inmates still whisper about phantom figures in the yard. Doors still creak open without cause, and unseen hands still brush against human skin. For every new generation of officers and prisoners, Rikers Island remains more than just a place of confinement. It's a place of echoes, where the energy of the forgotten dead mingles with the living. Mid-State Correctional Facility, located in the quiet town of Marcy, New York, appears at first glance like any other modern prison. Complex, a sprawling grid of concrete walls, razor wire, and watchtowers set against a backdrop of trees and open sky. Yet, behind its reinforced gates, a different kind of confinement seems to linger, one not of the living, but of the dead. For decades, stories have circulated about strange occurrences inside Mid-State's walls, where the restless spirits of former inmates are said to wander the corridors, bound forever to the place that once stripped them of freedom. Built in the early 1980s on land that once housed part of a World War II military hospital, the facility was intended to represent progressor, place of rehabilitation rather than punishment. But according to those who have spent long nights working within its fences, the past has never truly let go. The site's previous history carries with it a legacy of pain and loss. During its time as a military hospital, many soldiers wounded in combat were treated there, and not all survived. When the state later repurposed the land for a correctional facility, old foundations were buried beneath new construction. Some believe that those buried histories and the restless emotions tied to them left an imprint on the grounds. Officers working the late shifts have often described the eerie atmosphere that settles over the prison after lights out. The air grows still, footsteps echo a bit too long, and shadows seem to move even when no one is there. More than one guard has admitted to hearing faint whispers drifting through the halls, soft, indistinct voices calling names that no one recognizes. At first, many assume it's the sound of inmates talking through the vents, but when they check, they find silence. The sound continues, always at the edge of hearing, like something calling from another time. One former correctional officer recalled an incident during a routine night patrol. He was walking through one of the administrative corridors when he heard the distinct sound of a door creaking open behind him. He turned, flashlight in hand, but saw nothing. The doors were all locked, the hallway empty. As he turned back to continue, he caught sight of a figure standing at the far end, a man in an old prison uniform, pale and expressionless. The officer called out, thinking an inmate had somehow escaped his cell, but the figure didn't move. When he approached, it simply faded away into the dim light. Later, reviewing the security cameras, he found no sign of anyone there. Inmates, too, have told unnerving stories. Some claim to see shadowy shapes passing by their cell doors at night, footsteps echoing through the tiers long after count. A few have even described waking up to find a figure standing near their bed, silently watching before vanishing into the air. Others speak of sudden chills that sweep through their cells without reason, or the sound of crying echoing faintly from empty corners. One prisoner told a visiting chaplain that he often heard someone whispering his name at night, as though from inside the walls. He was convinced it was the spirit of a man who had died there years earlier, someone who, like him, never got the chance to say goodbye to his family. Records from the facility mention several unexplained deaths over the years, suicides, overdoses, and accidents that still haunt the memories of those who witnessed them. Each story seems to add another layer to the strange energy that fills the prison. Some guards believe the spirits of these inmates are still trapped, caught in an endless loop of confinement and despair. Others think the building itself has absorbed the emotional residue of decades of suffering, replaying moments of fear and grief like echoes imprinted in stone. Paranormal researchers who have studied the site describe it as a psychic vortex, a place where intense emotion and trauma have created a kind of spiritual magnet. During one unofficial investigation, visitors reported hearing disembodied voices through their recording devices. On playback, faint words could be heard, including "help" and "let me out." Thermal cameras captured unexplained cold spots, particularly near the older sections of the facility that were built atop the foundations of the former hospital. One researcher described feeling a pressure on her shoulder, as if someone had placed a hand there, though she was standing alone. Maintenance staff, who often work in the less trafficked parts of the complex, have their own accounts and of faint music echoing from the ventilation system, old slow songs that stop as soon as someone tries to trace the source. One worker swore he heard the sound of chains dragging across the floor one night in an empty hallway, accompanied by a low voice humming softly in the dark. The chapel, a small and quiet space within the facility, is said to be one of the most haunted areas. Visitors often report feeling an overwhelming sadness there, as though the air itself carries grief. Some say they've seen figures kneeling at the altar, heads bowed in prayer, only for them to vanish when approached. On one occasion, a volunteer minister claimed that while leading a small service, he saw a man in an outdated uniform sitting in the back row. When the lights flickered and returned, the man was gone. No one else had seen him. There are also reports of activity in the old infirmary wing, where nurses once treated inmates for illness and injury. The room is often colder than the rest of the facility, and the faint smell of antiseptic lingers even after years of disuse. Security cameras have picked up unexplained movement, their doors swinging open without cause, cabinets shifting slightly, and shadows passing across the walls. A few officers refuse to patrol that section alone, claiming to hear labored breathing and the faint clatter of medical instruments. What makes Mid-State's hauntings particularly unsettling is the emotional tone behind them. The spirits described are not angry or violent but sorrowful, lost, and confused, like echoes of lives that never found peace. Paranormal investigators theorize that these entities are bound by the very emotions that defined their lives: regret, fear, and the longing for freedom. They believe the combination of the land's history, the suffering endured by soldiers, and the despair of inmates has created a convergence of trapped energy that manifests as these lingering presences. Even visitors who don't believe in the paranormal admit that Mid-State Correctional Facility carries a strange, heavy feeling. The silence between the walls seems alive. Every sound, every whisper of wind, every creak of metal feels amplified, as if the building itself remembers. Some correctional officers who VA transferred away from Marcy claim they still dream of the place. Long hallways stretching endlessly, doors that open into darkness, and unseen voices calling from somewhere just out of reach. Greenhaven Correctional Facility, tucked away in the small hamlet of Stormville, New York, has long been one of the state's most infamous maximum security prisons. Built in the 1930s, its towering walls and watchtowers loom over the countryside like a fortress meant to contain not just men, but something far darker. Over the decades, it has held some of the most dangerous criminals in New York's history. Yet it's not only the inmates that make the place so unsettling. Guards who have worked the night shift for years say the building changes after dark. Even in the absence of inmates, sounds carry a footstep, a door creaking, a chain clinking softly somewhere in the distance. Many insist that what they hear cannot be explained by any living presence. Those who have spent enough time inside Greenhaven know that its walls don't just hold sound. They seem to remember it. The facility was originally constructed as a model of modern incarceration, a place meant for reform rather than punishment. But history tells a different story. The early years of Greenhaven were marked by violence, riots, and tragedy. Executions took place in secrecy, and solitary confinement cells became tombs of silence and madness. Some say the despair of those who perished within those walls never truly left. Over time, that sorrow took on a life of its own, transforming the prison into something haunted, not by monsters, but by memories that refuse to fade. The most common reports come from Cell Block D, one of the oldest wings of the prison. Guards doing their rounds there often speak of hearing footsteps pacing in the empty tiers above them, even when the entire block is locked down. On rare occasions, voices can be heard, low, indecipherable whispers that echo through the hallways, as if spoken in a forgotten language. One correctional officer described an incident that still chills him years later. It was during the early morning hours, long after lights out. He was walking through the corridor when he heard the sound of someone running behind him. The footsteps were fast and heavy, closing the distance quickly. When he turned around, flashlight raised, there was no one there. The sound stopped abruptly, leaving only silence. Then, from one of the nearby cells, a cell that had been empty for years, came the sound of labored breathing, slow and rasping, followed by a whisper, so faint it was almost a sigh. "Don't forget me." Visitors and volunteers have had their own encounters. During a prison outreach program, a volunteer reported hearing the distinct sound of a door slamming behind her in one of the administrative corridors. When she turned, the door stood open, swaying slightly on its hinges. Later, she described feeling as though someone was standing just behind her, breathing on her neck, though the hallway was empty. Even maintenance crews, hardened workers not prone to superstition, have walked off the job after encountering strange phenomena. One electrician swore that while repairing a light fixture, he heard someone whispering directly into his ear, though he was alone. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was pleading, almost desperate. There is a local legend that the spirits haunting Greenhaven are not just the souls of inmates, but also of those who once worked there. In the early years, several guards reportedly died on duty under mysterious circumstances. One fell from a watchtower during a night patrol. Another collapsed without warning near the solitary wing. Some staff members claim to have seen these men still performing their duties, ghostly figures pacing the perimeter or standing motionless in the shadows of the yard. Their uniforms are old-fashioned, their faces pale and indistinct. When approached, they vanish into the mist. What unsettles many who visit the facility is the sense that the prison itself seems alive. The air pulses faintly, doors groan without wind, and the very walls seem to exhale as temperatures shift. Paranormal investigators who have been granted access describe it as one of the most active sites in the Northeast. During one late-night investigation, electronic voice recorders captured chilling EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, of murmured phrases like "still here" and "cold." Another recording caught what sounded like a deep, rhythmic breathing, resonating through an empty cell block, as if the building itself were inhaling. Thermal cameras have detected unexplained cold spots throughout the structure, often near the solitary cells. Investigators who entered these areas reported feeling a crushing sense of dread, as though invisible eyes were watching. One researcher said it felt like walking through a place where time had stopped, where the despair of countless prisoners had been absorbed into the concrete. The prison chapel is another focal point for ghostly activity. Though it is meant to be a place of peace, visitors often describe feeling an oppressive weight there. Some have seen faint figures kneeling in prayer. Others have heard whispers of confessions with no one present. On one occasion, a guard entering the chapel late at night saw a figure standing by the altar, a tall man in an outdated uniform. The guard called out, but the figure didn't move. When he blinked, it was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of smoke and something metallic, like blood. There are also tales of the crying cell, a specific room in the disciplinary block where, according to prison lore, an inmate once took his own life after weeks in isolation. Guards walking past have reported hearing sobbing from within, even when the cell is empty. The sound is unmistakable. Deep, guttural weeping, full of despair. One night, an officer decided to open the door, hoping to debunk the story once and for all. Inside, he found nothing but cold air. As he turned to leave, he felt something brush against his shoulder, a light, fleeting touch, like a hand reaching out. They replay fragments of their lives in endless repetition, pacing, whispering, searching for redemption in a place that never offered it. Paranormal experts suggest that the collective pain and violence of the prison's past has imprinted itself into the structure, leaving behind a spiritual residue that manifests as these hauntings. Still, for those who walk its corridors at night, explanations matter little. The sounds, the shadows, the whispers, they feel real. Guards who have worked there for decades admit that even after all this time, they never truly get used to it. The fear becomes part of the routine, a constant reminder that they share the facility with more than just the living. Edgecombe Correctional Facility in Newburgh, New York, stands as an unassuming structure on the outside. Red brick walls, narrow windows, and a sense of order that comes with routine and discipline. But once inside, the atmosphere shifts. The air feels thicker, the hallways longer, and the silence heavier than it should be. To some, it's just an aging building filled with echoes. To others, it's a place where the past refuses to rest. The prison has housed countless inmates since its establishment, many of whom carried with them stories of tragedy, violence, and despair. Over the years, staff and visitors alike have come forward with unsettling experiences, whispers with no source, doors slamming shut without reason, and cold gusts of wind sweeping through sealed corridors. Paranormal investigators, drawn to the stories, have attempted to document the strange activity that seems to pulse through Edgecombe after dark. What they've found has only deepened the mystery. Guards who work the night shift often speak of the shadows. They appear suddenly, shapes that move just out of sight, sliding along the walls or lingering at the edge of dimly lit hallways. Some say they're tricks of the mind, born from exhaustion and flickering lights. But others insist these figures are too defined, too deliberate in their movement to be anything but real. One officer described seeing a silhouette walk across the corridor directly in front of him. He followed quickly, but when he turned the corner, the hallway was empty. The only sound was the faint creak of a door closing somewhere in the distance. The prison's structure seems to hold memories in its walls. The sound of chains rattling, of boots on tile, of voices rising in anger or despair. All of it has been reported long after such noises should have ceased. On certain nights, the atmosphere changes abruptly. The temperature drops, and a sudden chill cuts through the stillness, as if a door to another world has briefly opened. Several officers have reported feeling an icy gust sweep down the hallway, carrying with it faint whispers, words too faint to decipher, but unmistakably human. The most active area, according to both guards and investigators, is the old administrative wing. Though no longer used for inmate housing, it still hums with a strange energy. Doors that open and close on their own, sometimes slamming hard enough to echo across the facility. Light fixtures flicker, and shadows appear on walls even when no one is present to cast them. One security camera captured a faint, mist-like figure gliding across the hall before vanishing into a locked room. When officers entered moments later, they found the air inside freezing cold and the smell of cigarette smoke lingering, though smoking has been banned inside for years. Inmates, too, have spoken of encounters that defy explanation. Some claim to hear someone calling their names softly at night, though the voices come from the empty corners of their cells. Others have seen fleeting forms reflected in the glass of their windows, even when there's no one behind them. A few have described dreams so vivid they wake screaming, dreams of being watched, of cold hands pressing down on their chests, of figures standing over them in the dark. Theories about the source of Edgecombe's hauntings vary. Some say the spirits belong to former inmates who died within its walls, unable to escape the weight of their guilt or suffering. Others believe the energy of despair has seeped into the very foundation of the prison, replaying moments of anguish like a broken record. Paranormal experts who VA studied the site point to what they call residual energy, the idea that powerful emotions, especially fear and pain, can leave behind echoes that persist long after death. One story in particular has been retold by multiple officers through the years. Late one winter night, a guard making his rounds heard a door creak open down the east wing. He assumed another officer had entered the area, but when he checked his radio, he learned he was alone in that section. As he approached, the air grew noticeably colder. The door ahead stood half open, moving slightly as if pushed by an unseen hand. From the darkness beyond came a faint sound, breathing, steady and labored. He called out, but there was no reply. Stepping closer, he felt a rush of icy air pass through him. His flashlight flickered, and for a split second, he saw a shadowed figure standing in the doorway. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind silence so deep he could hear his own heartbeat. Another recurring report involves the sound of footsteps in the main corridor long after the inmates have been locked down. Guards say they can hear someone walking slow, deliberate steps that echo off the concrete. The sound often stops abruptly, as though the unseen walker is aware they're being followed. On more than one occasion, officers have checked the security monitors only to find the hallway empty. Yet the footsteps continue. When investigators brought thermal imaging and audio equipment to EdgeCom, they captured more than they expected. In one session, while recording near the old cell block, a deep voice whispered what sounded like "I'm here" directly into the microphone. No one present had spoken. In another instance, temperature sensors detected sudden drops of nearly 20 degrees in enclosed rooms. Cameras caught faint orbs of light darting through the darkness, and motion sensors triggered with no visible source. Even the most skeptical staff members have grown uneasy. Some refuse to walk certain corridors alone at night. Others keep their radios turned up just to drown out the silence. Visitors who've toured the facility have described the same sensations: the inexplicable chill, the heavy feeling of being watched, and, on rare occasions, a brief glimpse of movement in the shadows. Locals in Newburgh say that EdgeCom's energy can be felt even from outside. Some who VA-driven past late at night claim to see lights flashing in windows of closed-off sections, or dark figures standing near the gates before vanishing into the fog. Whether it's a haunting or a reflection of the anguish that passed through its halls, no one can deny the strange pull the place exerts. The Sing Sing Annex, an extension of the infamous Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York, has long been the subject of whispers and speculation. While Sing Sing itself carries a reputation steeped in history, executions, and infamy, the annex has its own dark character, quieter, yet no less unsettling. Built to handle overflow from the main prison, its halls are narrower, its walls older, and the echoes of the past seem particularly strong there. Over the decades, staff, inmates, and visitors alike have reported experiences that defy explanation, making the annex a place where the boundary between the living and the dead feels disturbingly thin. The most common reports come from staff working the night shift. Many speak of phantom footsteps echoing down empty corridors. The sound is unmistakable, heavy, deliberate, like someone pacing while deep in thought. Yet, when they follow the noise, the hallways are deserted, doors remain locked, cells empty, and the only response is the eerie repetition of the steps fading into the darkness. Some officers describe the sensation of being watched, a gaze that lingers at the edge of vision, shifting as they move from one end of the corridor to the other. Visitors who have ventured into the annex often describe a similar feeling. Even during the day, the air seems charged, thick with tension. There is a sense that the walls themselves remember, that they hold the sorrow, anger, and fear of those who lived and died within them. Many report hearing faint whispers, unintelligible at first, only to realize that they resemble the muffled conversations of inmates long past. Occasionally, the whispers rise into anguished cries, echoing off the concrete, chilling the spine of anyone within earshot. Shadowy figures are another frequent occurrence. Staff have recounted seeing guards in old-fashioned uniforms, standing silently at the ends of hallways, or appearing briefly in the doorways of deserted cells. When approached, they vanish, leaving behind a heavy coldness that lingers for minutes afterward. Inmates have claimed to see figures moving between cells, disappearing when caught in the glow of the fluorescent lights. The shapes are often indistinct, more shadow than substance, yet their presence is undeniable, a reminder that the annex carries the memories of its past inhabitants. The sound of chains rattling has been reported countless times. Late at night, in the absence of any prisoners, chains clink as if dragged across the floors or dropped from above. Some describe it as a low, rhythmic sound, like someone walking with shackles around their wrists or ankles. Others hear sudden clatters and thuds, as though an invisible struggle is taking place in the shadows. In certain sections of the annex, these sounds are accompanied by a cold draft, sharp and biting, as if the air itself carries the lingering anguish of those long confined. Distant screams have also been noted. Occasionally, a muffled scream rises from somewhere deep within the annex, fading as quickly as it appears. Guards report that the sound is not localized. It moves along the halls, echoing unpredictably, almost as if the building itself is amplifying it. Some believe these cries are echoes of executions, riots, or desperate attempts at escape, trapped in the very structure of the annex. Others suggest they may be residual energy, a manifestation of fear and suffering left behind by inmates whose lives were marked by confinement and despair. The annex has its own stories of apparitions. One officer recounted seeing a prisoner sitting on a cot in a cell that had been empty for decades. The figure stared blankly ahead, expressionless, then slowly dissolved into the air when approached. On another occasion, a visitor walking through the older sections felt a cold hand rest lightly on their shoulder, only to find no one behind them. These experiences are often subtle but leave a lasting impression, creating a sense that the annex is alive in ways that defy reason. Even the areas meant for administration are not immune. Doors in empty offices swing open without cause. Files are sometimes found scattered on the floor, despite being neatly organized moments earlier. Lights flicker, often in patterns that mimic the presence of someone walking by. And occasional gusts of cold air sweep through hallways that are otherwise sealed. Staff members have reported feeling an almost oppressive presence in certain rooms, a heaviness that is difficult to shake. Paranormal investigators have taken a keen interest in the annex. Using electronic voice recorders, infrared cameras, and thermal imaging, they have documented activity that appears to have no natural explanation. EVPs capture faint voices pleading or calling names. Thermal cameras reveal cold spots moving across rooms where no one is present. Infrared recordings sometimes pick up fleeting figures, only to vanish the moment anyone attempts to focus on them. In one investigation, a recorder captured the sound of chains dragging across the floor, followed by a distant scream, a sound that seems to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once. Some speculate that the hauntings of the annex are tied to its proximity to the main prison. Inmates who were executed, injured, or tormented in Sing Sing itself may have left a spiritual imprint that extends into the annex. Others believe that the annex, being older and less frequented, allows these echoes to manifest more freely. Whatever the cause, the experiences reported by staff, visitors, and investigators suggest that the space is haunted by more than memory. It is haunted by presence, the lingering consciousness of those who suffered there. Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, located in Bedford, New York, is the state's only maximum security prison for women. Its brick walls and iron gates hold not only the routine of incarceration, but also centuries of sorrow, hardship, and whispered history. Over time, Bedford Hills has developed a reputation not only for its strict management and secure facilities, but also for something far less tangible: the lingering presence of spirits who may never have left. Stories of ghostly activity have emerged from both staff and visitors, describing experiences that are difficult to explain and impossible to ignore. The prison's origins date back to the early 20th century, and like many institutions of its time, its early years were marked by harsh conditions. Women incarcerated within its walls faced overcrowding, limited resources, and strict discipline that often bordered on cruelty. Some inmates never survived the grueling environment, succumbing to illness, despair, or violence. Over the decades, their suffering seems to have left a trace. And those who walk the corridors late at night sometimes feel as though the weight of that history presses down upon them. Staff members often speak of the inexplicable sensations that occur after dark. One of the most common experiences is a feeling of heaviness, a physical and emotional pressure that settles over the shoulders and chest. Officers describe the sensation as though the sorrow and pain of decades of women's lives are concentrated in the hallways, invisible but undeniably present. In some areas, the air feels thick, difficult to breathe, and a subtle chill persists, even in the warmest months. Visitors to Bedford Hills have reported hearing soft sobbing or the faint murmur of voices, often echoing through hallways long after the building is quiet. The voices are difficult to distinguish, sometimes rising to whispered phrases or cries of anguish. Some say they have heard their own names called, as if by someone unseen, only to turn and find the corridor empty. These auditory phenomena are most commonly reported in older sections of the prison, where the walls have borne witness to generations of suffering. Apparitions are also a recurring phenomenon at Bedford Hills. Women in outdated prison uniforms have been seen gliding silently through hallways, disappearing into walls or fading into shadow when approached. Their movements are deliberate but slow, and they often seem lost in thought or caught in moments of their past lives. Some staff have described seeing figures standing by the doors of empty cells, staring blankly ahead before dissolving as if the light itself consumes them. These ghostly women are not menacing, but their presence carries a palpable sadness that lingers long after they vanish. One particularly striking account came from a night shift officer who was patrolling the cell blocks late one evening. As she walked through an empty corridor, she noticed a figure seated on a bench at the end of the hall. The woman wore an older-style uniform, the kind no longer issued, and her posture was slumped in quiet despair. When the officer approached, the figure lifted her head slightly, revealing a pale, hollow expression, and then simply disappeared before her eyes. The officer described feeling drained and heavy, as though some of the sorrow she witnessed had transferred to her very being. Other staff have described doors opening and closing without cause. Some cells that are long vacant seem to carry a residual presence, a faint creaking of hinges, the shuffling of unseen feet, or the soft thud of objects shifting as if someone is moving them from within. In the infirmary, where women once lay ill and in pain, visitors and staff have reported sudden temperature drops, accompanied by whispers and fleeting glimpses of shadowy forms. The air in these spaces often feels charged with an invisible energy, a reminder that the memories of those who suffered there are never far from the surface. Bedford Hills has also been the focus of paranormal investigations. Researchers equipped with audio recorders, thermal cameras, and electromagnetic field detectors have documented activity that cannot be easily explained. Electronic voice phenomena often capture soft cries, repeated names, or pleas for help that seem to come from empty corridors. Thermal imaging reveals cold spots moving independently through rooms, and motion sensors occasionally trigger in areas where no living person is present. On one investigation, a recorder captured a long, drawn-out sob, followed by the soft sound of footsteps retreating into darkness, as though someone invisible had walked alongside the investigators before fading away. The historical context of Bedford Hills provides a framework for understanding the reported activity. The prison's strict routines, combined with the hardships and tragedies endured by its inmates, created an environment charged with emotion. Paranormal experts suggest that intense suffering can leave behind residual energy, an imprint of pain and sorrow that manifests as the sounds, sensations, and apparitions reported today. In the case of Bedford Hills, the energy seems concentrated in the older cell blocks and common areas where the memories of decades of lives intersect. Visitors and staff alike describe a profound emotional impact when encountering these phenomena. Some feel a heavy sadness or oppressive weight, while others experience fleeting fear or unease. Despite the unsettling nature of these encounters, many emphasize that the spirits appear to be more sorrowful than threatening. There is a sense of longing, a need for acknowledgement, as though the women who pass through these halls wish to be remembered and not forgotten. Even during routine days, the prison carries a subtle reminder of its haunted character. The creak of floorboards, the flutter of a door, the whisper of wind through a vent, all can carry echoes of the past. Those who have spent time at Bedford Hills often report a heightened awareness of the history contained within its walls. Every hallway, cell, and common room seems to tell a story of endurance, despair, and sometimes redemption. Downstate Correctional Facility, located in Fishkill, New York, is a maximum security prison known for housing some of the state's most dangerous inmates. Its gray stone walls rise sharply against the surrounding landscape, and the echo of modern correctional routines fills its corridors during the day. Yet, as night falls and the facility quiets, Another presence seems to awaken, one that is unseen, but felt in the very air. For decades, guards, inmates, and visitors have reported experiences that defy explanation. Chains rattling in empty hallways, furniture moving on its own, and distant screams that chill the soul. These reports have earned Downstate a reputation not just for its security, but for its lingering shadows of the past. The facility has a long history, with a design meant to enforce control and order. Its cell blocks, built with cold concrete and reinforced steel, have held men who have endured years of confinement, often under harsh conditions. Over the decades, some of these inmates died in their cells, succumbed to illness, or met violent ends at the hands of others. Paranormal enthusiasts suggest that the intense suffering within these walls has left behind echoes, residual energy that continues to replay the final moments of those who once lived and died here. One of the most commonly reported phenomena is the sound of chains. Late at night, in corridors where no prisoner walks, guards have heard the unmistakable clinking of metal. Some describe it as the dragging of shackles along the floor, others as the rhythmic clatter of footsteps wearing chains. Officers who follow the sounds often find empty hallways, doors locked, and no sign of a living presence. The noises are not isolated to a single location. They appear throughout the facility, haunting both older cell blocks and areas that see little traffic after light. Screams and cries are another unsettling feature. Witnesses often report sudden, sharp bursts of sound, a high-pitched scream, a muffled wail, or a long, drawn-out shout. These cries seem to originate from the deepest corridors, echoing through the concrete and steel, only to fade as quickly as they appear. Some inmates have claimed to hear the voices of those who were executed or murdered decades earlier, replaying the pain and desperation of their final moments. Guards report that even the most skeptical officers feel a deep unease when these sounds ripple through the silent corridors. Furniture moving on its own is yet another strange occurrence. Desks, chairs, and even filing cabinets have been reported sliding across floors and empty rooms. In some cases, doors creak open or shut without explanation, sometimes slamming with enough force to reverberate across the hallways. Officers describe these incidents as sudden and unpredictable, often occurring in locations that have long been vacant. Paranormal investigators suggest that these movements may be manifestations of residual energy, the objects moving in sympathy with echoes of past violence, fear, or frustration. Shadowy figures are frequently seen by both staff and inmates. Some describe them as vague silhouettes that vanish when approached, while others report more defined shapes resembling former prisoners. These apparitions are often seen pacing cell blocks, standing silently in doorways, or watching from the shadows. There are reports of figures sitting in chairs or leaning against walls, motionless, yet emanating a palpable sense of sadness or despair. The lingering sense of presence remained heavy and oppressive long after the figure vanished. Visitors who have toured the facility occasionally report similar phenomena. Even in areas close to the public, some describe hearing faint whispers, footsteps in empty hallways, and cold gusts of air that seem to appear without source. The older parts of the prison, those built with thicker stone walls and narrower corridors, are said to be the most active. In these areas, the atmosphere is often described as heavy, thick with the residue of pain and suffering accumulated over decades. Paranormal investigations at Downstate have captured evidence that defies conventional explanation. Electronic voice recorders have picked up faint cries and pleas, often repeating names or phrases that correspond to historical records of past inmates. Thermal cameras reveal cold spots that move independently through the hallways, sometimes forming shapes that resemble human figures. Motion sensors occasionally trigger in empty cells or corridors, detecting movement where none is visible. One investigator described the sensation of being followed, a weight on his shoulders, a chill in his spine, as he moved through an old cell block late at night. The historical context of Downstate seems inseparable from its paranormal reputation. The prison has been the site of violent confrontations, riots, and tragic deaths, all of which may contribute to the energy that remains. Some suggest that the spirits are not malicious, but rather residual, repeating moments of despair and suffering over and over, trapped within the walls that once confined them. Others believe that certain individuals may linger intentionally, unable or unwilling to move on, replaying their lives in endless loops that the living can sometimes glimpse. The combination of auditory, visual, and tactile phenomena creates an atmosphere that is hard to ignore. Staff report an instinctive unease in certain parts of the facility, a heightened awareness that something unseen is present. Officers have mentioned feeling cold hands brush against their arms, hearing whispers directly in their ears, and sensing a gaze following them as they patrol. Inmates, too, speak of the sense of being watched, even when no guards are nearby. Despite its modern operations, Downstate Correctional Facility carries the imprint of its history. The sounds of chains, the shadowed figures, the cold drafts, and the anguished cries are reminders that the past is never truly gone. When night falls, the prison transforms. The familiar routines fade, leaving behind corridors alive with the echoes of sorrow, pain, and lingering spirits. For those who have walked its halls after dark, the experience is haunting, leaving an indelible impression of a place where the weight of human suffering never fully dissipates. Coxsackie Correctional Facility, located along the Hudson River in New York, has long been regarded as one of the state's most formidable prisons. Its imposing stone walls, high fences, and watchtowers are the first indicators of the institution's strict security measures. Inside, however, there is a presence that cannot be contained by locks or bars. Over decades, the facility has gained a reputation for something far less tangible than the daily routines of incarceration. Ghostly activity that continues to unsettle both staff and visitors. Shadowy figures, unexplained cold spots, and eerie sounds have all been reported, making Coxsackie a place where the past seems never to rest. The prison was built in the early 20th century and has housed countless inmates since its opening. Many of these men endured harsh conditions, including long sentences, strict disciplinary measures, and labor-intensive routines. Some died within the facility, while others were subjected to punishments that left a mark not only on their bodies, but perhaps also on the space around them. Staff and paranormal investigators alike believe that this history has left lingering energy, a residue of suffering and despair that occasionally manifests as ghostly phenomena. One of the most frequently reported occurrences at Coxsackie is the sighting of shadowy figures. Officers on night shifts often describe seeing silhouettes moving at the edge of their vision, figures that appear solid enough to be real but vanish when approached. In the cell blocks, shadows have been observed pacing behind bars in empty cells, lingering in corners, or appearing briefly in the hallways. In some cases, staff have reported seeing figures wearing outdated prison uniforms, a chilling reminder of the generations who once walked these halls. These apparitions are not always hostile, but their presence is accompanied by a palpable heaviness, a sensation that leaves observers uneasy long after the sighting. Cold spots are another common phenomenon at Coxsackie. Visitors and staff frequently report sudden drops in temperature, often in enclosed corridors or empty cells. The chill can be so severe that it makes skin tingle and breath visible in the air. Even during warmer months, paranormal investigators often associate these cold spots with the presence of spirits, suggesting that the energy of past inmates lingers in specific locations. The spots often coincide with sightings of shadows or the feeling of being watched, reinforcing the idea that these occurrences are not random but rather tied to the history of the facility. Unexplained sounds add to the eerie atmosphere. Doors have been reported opening and closing without cause, and footsteps echo down corridors long after lights out. Some witnesses describe the clatter of chains or the dragging of objects across floors where no one is present. Others hear low murmurs or indistinct whispers, often seeming to come from empty cells. In certain areas, the sounds escalate into anguished cries, chilling anyone nearby. Guards who have worked the night shift for years admit that these experiences are difficult to dismiss, particularly when multiple staff members report similar events in the same locations. Paranormal experts have spent significant time at Coxsackie attempting to document these unusual occurrences using electronic voice recorders, thermal imaging cameras, and motion sensors. Investigators have captured evidence that defies easy explanation. EVPs have recorded faint voices, calling names, or pleading for help. Thermal cameras have detected cold areas moving through hallways, forming shapes that resemble human figures. Motion sensors often trigger without any visible movement, suggesting the presence of something unseen yet tangible. One investigator reported feeling an oppressive weight on his shoulders while walking through an old cell block, a sensation he could not account for. The history of Coxsackie Correctional Facility provides context for its haunting reputation. In its early years, the prison was known for its strict discipline and harsh punishments. Solitary confinement was often used to control inmates, and laborious routines tested both physical and mental endurance. Some inmates died under these conditions, whether from illness, despair, or accidents during work assignments. Paranormal researchers suggest that intense emotions, such as fear, pain, and hopelessness, can leave behind residual energy, which manifests as the phenomena reported today. The age of the building, with its thick stone walls and narrow corridors, may amplify these lingering energies, allowing them to persist over decades. Inmates themselves have occasionally reported experiences that defy explanation. Some claim to hear voices calling from empty cells or corridors. Others speak of seeing figures out of the corner of their eyes, moving silently and vanishing when confronted. A few have described cold touches on their shoulders or arms, as though someone unseen is brushing past them. These encounters are often described with a sense of unease rather than fear, suggesting that the spirits are lingering echoes rather than malicious entities. Even visitors to the prison have felt the weight of the past. Those who tour the older sections report sudden chills, fleeting shadows, and an oppressive atmosphere that seems to press down from the ceilings and walls. Some claim to hear whispers in languages or tones that are unfamiliar, adding to the sense that the facility is alive with memories of those who suffered within it. Staff often note that the older cell blocks are the most active, particularly during the quiet hours of night when the facility is largely empty. The cumulative effect of these experiences has solidified Coxsackie's reputation as a haunted location. Footsteps in empty corridors, shadowy figures in cells, cold drafts, and anguished whispers all contribute to an atmosphere that is thick with history and mystery. While some attribute these occurrences to imagination or fatigue, the consistency of reports over decades makes the phenomenon difficult to ignore. Whether one believes in ghosts or sees these events as echoes of the past, there is little doubt that the energy of Coxsackie Correctional Facility is powerful and enduring. Sing Sing Maximum Security in Auburn, New York, is one of the most notorious prisons in the United States, known for its strict routines, high-profile inmates, and long history of executions. Its maximum security wing, in particular, has developed a reputation that goes beyond the confines of the criminal justice system. Within these walls, staff, visitors, and paranormal investigators have reported strange and unsettling experiences that suggest the presence of something far older and more persistent than the modern routines of the facility. Shadowy figures pacing the halls, doors slamming with no apparent cause, sudden cold drafts, and anguished wails from empty cells all contribute to an atmosphere thick with fear and history. The maximum security wing was designed to hold the most dangerous prisoners, individuals who required constant supervision and strict control. Its narrow corridors, heavy steel doors, and small cells are intended to isolate and restrict. Yet these same features may also amplify the feelings of unease reported by those who enter after dark. The history of the wing is one of intense suffering, decades of confinement, punishments, and, in some cases, deaths within the cells. It is this combination of human anguish and architectural confinement that many believe contributes to the spectral activity observed there. One of the most frequently reported phenomena is the appearance of shadowy figures. Officers on night shifts describe seeing dark silhouettes moving along the narrow hallways, pacing back and forth, or standing motionless in the corners of long, empty corridors. These figures are often fleeting, vanishing when approached, yet the sense of their presence is strong and undeniable. Some witnesses claim that the shadows resemble inmates from decades past, wearing old-style prison uniforms. There are stories of guards walking down a corridor, only to feel as though they are being followed, only to turn and find the hallway empty. The shadow gone, yet the oppressive feeling lingering. Doors slamming unexpectedly is another common occurrence. In the maximum security wing, heavy steel doors are often heard bursting open or slamming shut when no one is near. Sometimes the sound echoes through multiple hallways, startling officers and even visitors. The sudden movement of these doors is unpredictable, occurring at any time of night, and often accompanied by a noticeable drop in temperature. Paranormal researchers suggest that these actions may be caused by residual energy, a lingering echo of the emotional intensity that the space has absorbed over the years. Cold drafts in the dead of night are perhaps one of the most unnerving experiences reported. Certain cells or hallways can suddenly become freezing, despite climate control systems or closed windows. Staff have described walking through corridors and suddenly feeling an icy gust brush past them, raising goosebumps and a sense of dread. Some believe that these cold spots are the physical manifestation of spirits, a residual energy that remains from decades of confinement and despair. They often coincide with other phenomena, such as the sighting of a shadow or the sound of footsteps in empty cells. Anguished wails from empty cells add another layer of unease to the maximum security wing. Witnesses describe hearing screams and cries that seem to come from cells that have been unoccupied for years. The sound is often described as hollow, echoing through the corridors, carrying an emotional weight that is difficult to ignore. Some guards report that the wails appear at random, sometimes during routine checks or at night when the facility is silent. Paranormal experts suggest that these cries may be echoes of the final moments of inmates who suffered or died within the wing, replaying the fear, anger, and sorrow of their experiences over and over. Staff members have shared their own chilling encounters. One officer recalled walking a corridor and seeing a figure standing at the end, its features obscured by shadow. When he moved closer, the figure disappeared, leaving behind only a heavy, oppressive sensation. Others have reported feeling sudden pressure on their shoulders, as if invisible hands were pressing down on them while walking through certain areas. Some officers mention hearing whispers or faint conversations that cannot be traced to any source, adding to the feeling that the maximum security wing is alive with remnants of the past. Paranormal investigators have taken a keen interest in this wing of Sing Sing, using thermal imaging cameras, motion sensors, and electronic voice recorders. They have documented evidence that cannot be easily explained. Thermal cameras have picked up cold spots moving independently along hallways, while EVPs capture voices calling names or pleading for help. Motion sensors frequently trigger without detecting any visible movement, suggesting that unseen presences may be traversing the corridors. In one instance, a researcher recorded the sound of chains dragging along the floor, accompanied by a distant scream, even though no one was present in the wing at the time. The history of Sing Sing's maximum security wing provides a context for these experiences. It was the section of the prison where the most dangerous criminals were kept, often in isolation or under harsh discipline. Over time, many inmates endured years of suffering, and some died within these walls. The emotional intensity of their experiences, fear, anger, grief, and despair may have left an imprint on the environment, creating residual energy that manifests in the forms observed today. Paranormal experts believe that the combination of physical confinement and emotional trauma has resulted in a space that continues to echo the past, replaying moments of anguish for anyone sensitive enough to perceive them. Even visitors to Sing Sing report feeling the weight of the past. Those who toured the facility during the day often described sudden chills, an oppressive atmosphere, or the fleeting sense of being watched. The older sections, particularly the maximum security wing, are said to carry the strongest residual energy, with shadows, cold drafts, and unexplained noises reported more frequently than elsewhere in the facility. Great Meadow Correctional Facility, located in Comstock, New York, is a medium-security prison with a long and complicated history. Built to house men serving time for a variety of offenses, the facility has been operational for decades. And with that history comes stories that reach far beyond the ordinary routines of prison life. Staff, visitors, and paranormal enthusiasts alike have reported experiences that suggest Great Meadow is more than a place of confinement. It is a place where echoes of the past persist, replaying the lives and routines of inmates long gone. Doors open and close without explanation. Disembodied voices fill empty corridors, and shadowy figures flit at the edge of vision, leaving a lasting sense of unease in those who witness them. The prison's architecture, with long, narrow corridors and heavy steel doors, seems to amplify the sense of isolation and lingering energy. Staff who work night shifts often speak of unusual phenomena, starting with doors that appear to move on their own. Heavy cell doors, sometimes old and rusted, swing open or shut without anyone nearby. The sounds echo through the halls, startling officers and creating the unsettling impression that someone or something is walking the corridors unseen. Even in the presence of modern security systems and constant surveillance, these occurrences remain unexplained, contributing to the facility's reputation as a site of paranormal activity. Disembodied voices are another common report. Staff and visitors alike have described hearing murmurs, whispers, and even distinct phrases coming from empty cells. The voices are often faint, as though spoken at a distance, and sometimes seem to respond to questions or remarks. Paranormal investigators have captured electronic voice phenomena (EVPs) in these areas, recording soft cries, pleas for help, or repeated names, suggesting that the spirits of past inmates may be attempting to communicate. These occurrences are more frequent during the quiet hours of night, when the facility is largely empty and the residual energy of decades of incarceration is most palpable. Shadow figures are frequently seen at the edge of vision. Officers walking through the halls have reported glimpsing dark silhouettes moving just out of reach, vanishing the moment they attempt to focus on them. These figures often appear near cell blocks, pacing as though engaged in some unfinished routine, or standing silently at the end of hallways, watching before dissolving into the darkness. In some cases, they resemble prisoners from decades past, wearing old uniforms or appearing in familiar postures from the prison's history. Witnesses often describe a lingering sense of presence after these sightings, a weight in the air that is oppressive and difficult to shake. Many accounts suggest that the spirits of past prisoners are caught in a cycle, replaying their daily routines even in death. Officers have reported seeing figures moving as if walking the halls to their assigned tasks, bending over beds or performing work in empty rooms, only to vanish when approached. Some believe these manifestations are residual echoes, a repetition of past actions imprinted on the environment, rather than conscious spirits. Still, the emotional intensity of the impressions is undeniable, leaving staff with a lingering sense of the despair, frustration, and monotony that once filled these spaces. Visitors to the facility occasionally experience the same phenomena. Even those on guided tours of the older cell blocks report sudden chills, cold drafts, or the inexplicable sensation of being watched. Doors may creak open behind them, or the faint sound of footsteps may follow them down deserted hallways. In several accounts, guests have described the unsettling feeling that someone unseen is walking alongside them, just beyond their peripheral vision. The effect is disorienting and, in some cases, physically chilling, reinforcing the sense that Great Meadow is a prison not only for the living, but for lingering spirits. Paranormal investigators have taken a particular interest in Great Meadow due to the consistency and variety of reported phenomena. Using thermal imaging, motion sensors, and audio recorders, researchers have documented evidence that defies conventional explanation. Thermal cameras have revealed cold spots moving through empty halls, sometimes forming shapes that resemble human figures. Motion sensors occasionally trigger in areas devoid of human presence, and audio recordings have captured low murmurs, faint cries, or even sounds resembling the dragging of objects. One investigator reported feeling a sudden heaviness on his shoulders, as though invisible hands pressed down while walking through a deserted cell. The history of Great Meadow Correctional Facility contributes to its paranormal reputation. Over decades of operation, countless men have served sentences there, enduring strict routines, laborious work assignments, and periods of isolation. Some died within the facility, while others experienced hardship or injury under harsh conditions. Paranormal experts suggest that intense human emotion, fear, suffering, and despair can leave residual energy behind, creating imprints on the environment that persist long after the individuals themselves have passed. In the case of Great Meadow, these imprints may manifest as the shadowy figures, cold spots, and disembodied voices reported so frequently by witnesses. Staff members have described the cumulative effect of these phenomena on their work. Some officers report a heightened awareness of the environment, sensing movement or presence even when the halls appear empty. Others describe difficulty in certain areas, feeling a sudden oppressive weight or an unexplained unease. Inmates have also noted occasional unexplainable occurrences, though these reports are less frequent due to the constant presence of living occupants that may mask the residual activity. Even during routine daytime operations, the prison carries echoes of its past. The faint creak of floorboards, the flutter of a door, the soft whisper of air through vents can all evoke a sense of history and lingering presence. Staff and visitors alike often report that the older sections of the facility, with their stone walls and long, narrow corridors, seem the most alive with these residual energies. Clinton Maximum Security, located in Dannemora, New York, is one of the most formidable sections of Clinton Correctional Facility, designed to house the state's most dangerous inmates. The Maximum Security Wing is built with imposing concrete walls, heavy steel doors, and long, narrow corridors that amplify every sound. The facility operates under strict protocols and constant surveillance. Yet behind these modern measures lies a history filled with hardship, suffering, and, according to many, restless spirits. Reports of strange apparitions, unexplained cold spots, and whispers that seem to emanate from the walls themselves have earned Clinton Maximum Security a reputation as one of the most haunted prisons in the state. The wing has held notorious criminals for decades, men whose crimes and temperaments required isolation and strict control. The environment is designed to enforce discipline, but it also magnifies fear, despair, and tension. Over the years, these intense emotions, combined with punishment, long sentences, and occasional deaths within the cells, are believed to have left a lingering presence in the corridors. Staff and visitors alike describe experiences that defy explanation, suggesting that the energy of the past is still very much alive. One of the most frequently reported phenomena in Clinton Maximum Security is the appearance of shadowy figures. Officers on night duty often speak of seeing silhouettes moving along the edges of their vision, figures that pace back and forth in empty hallways or vanish when approached. Sometimes these shadows appear near cells where past inmates spent decades, staring through bars with blank expressions. Witnesses describe feeling a weight in the air when these figures are present, a sensation that is heavy, oppressive, and chilling. In some cases, guards have reported seeing multiple figures simultaneously, moving in deliberate patterns that mimic the routines of living inmates, as if the spirits are replaying moments from their past lives. Cold spots are another hallmark of paranormal activity in the Maximum Security Wing. Officers and maintenance staff often report sudden drops in temperature. Even in areas where climate control is functioning normally, these cold pockets can be localized, freezing the air in a single corridor or cell, and are often accompanied by a distinct feeling of unease. Some staff describe the cold as moving through them, a physical sensation that causes goosebumps and shivers, while others report that it seems to sweep down hallways, almost as if following a hidden presence. Paranormal researchers suggest that these cold spots may be physical manifestations of spiritual energy, residual imprints left by the emotional intensity of past inmates. Eerie whispers are frequently reported in the Maximum Security Wing. These voices are often faint, unintelligible, and seem to come directly from the walls themselves. Staff have described hearing murmurs echoing down hallways, sometimes calling out names or repeating phrases, though no source can be identified. In several accounts, multiple people have heard the same whisper simultaneously, suggesting that these experiences are not simply products of imagination or fatigue. Some visitors have even reported hearing distinct conversations that end abruptly when they attempt to investigate, leaving an unsettling sense that the walls are communicating in ways beyond comprehension. Doors opening and closing on their own are another common experience. Heavy steel doors swing without warning, sometimes slamming shut with enough force to echo through the facility. The sound is often accompanied by the movement of unseen objects, footsteps in empty corridors, or the impression of someone standing nearby. Guards on patrol have reported moments where they pause in a hallway, certain that someone is present, only to find the area completely empty. These unexplained events contribute to the perception that Clinton Maximum Security is more than a place of confinement. It is a living, breathing space, haunted by echoes of the past. Some of the most unsettling reports come from inmates themselves. Even though the wing is heavily monitored, prisoners have occasionally reported shadowy figures appearing in their cells, cold air enveloping them, or whispers filling the darkness. These experiences are often described as more sorrowful than threatening, as if the spirits are replaying memories rather than seeking to harm. Nevertheless, the intensity of the encounters can be deeply disturbing, particularly when they occur in isolation during the long, silent hours of the night. Paranormal investigators have taken a keen interest in Clinton Maximum Security, often returning repeatedly to document activity. Using thermal imaging, motion sensors, and electronic voice recorders, they have captured evidence that challenges rational explanation. Thermal cameras reveal cold spots moving along hallways, sometimes forming indistinct human shapes. Motion sensors frequently trigger in empty areas, and EVPs record whispers, moans, and even faint cries that match the descriptions of past witnesses. Investigators have described a pervasive sense of oppression in the wing, as if unseen forces are observing their every movement, pressing down on the body and mind with a weight that is hard to shake. The history of Clinton Maximum Security helps explain why these phenomena are so persistent. The wing was designed to hold the most dangerous and higher-risk inmates, many of whom endured years of harsh confinement. Punitive routines, solitary confinement, and instances of violence created an environment charged with strong emotions, fear, anger, and despair. Some inmates died within the wing, whether from illness, accidents, or violence, and it is believed that these deaths may have left a residual imprint on the structure itself. Paranormal experts theorize that intense suffering can linger, creating echoes of the past that manifest as the sightings, sounds, and sensations reported today. Even in the light of day, the wing carries the weight of its history. Footsteps echo strangely through empty corridors. The clanging of doors seems amplified, and the architecture itself, narrow halls, stone walls, and steel doors, creates an oppressive atmosphere that seems alive. Staff report a heightened awareness when walking through certain areas, sensing presence even when no one is visible. Visitors report an almost tangible sense of being watched, a feeling that the memories of past inmates are observing the living. Fishkill Correctional Facility, located near Beacon, New York, is a medium-security prison with a history that stretches back decades. Over the years, it has housed a wide range of inmates, from those serving short sentences to men with long-term, higher-risk commitments. While the facility operates under strict routines and modern security protocols, it has also earned a reputation far beyond the ordinary, a reputation for paranormal activity that continues to intrigue both staff and visitors. Reports of chains dragging across empty corridors, disembodied footsteps, whispers in abandoned cell blocks, and shadowy figures appearing and vanishing have made Fishkill a site of chilling encounters. The prison's architecture contributes to the sense of unease that permeates the facility. Long, narrow corridors lined with steel doors, stone walls that echo every sound, and isolated cell blocks create an environment that amplifies both sound and tension. Staff members who work night shifts often speak of eerie experiences that seem to defy logical explanation. Doors creak and slam without cause. Cold gusts of air sweep through hallways, and footsteps can be heard echoing down corridors where no one is present. These phenomena often occur in the older sections of the prison, where the weight of history is most palpable. One of the most frequently reported experiences at Fishkill is the sound of chains. Witnesses describe hearing the unmistakable clatter of metal dragging across concrete floors, sometimes accompanied by footsteps or the echo of a cell door closing. Guards have reported following the sounds through deserted corridors, only to find empty hallways and locked cells. The phenomenon is not limited to a single area. Reports of chains moving on their own have come from multiple cell blocks, suggesting that these noises are a recurring feature of the facility. Paranormal researchers believe that these sounds may be residual echoes of prisoners long gone, replaying the movements and routines of their confinement. Footsteps in empty corridors are another hallmark of Fishkill's haunted reputation. Officers on patrol often hear slow, deliberate steps following them, or the rapid shuffle of feet echoing down the hall. The footsteps can stop suddenly, or seem to move through walls and corners, creating the impression that something unseen is moving through the prison. In some cases, multiple staff members have reported hearing the same footsteps simultaneously, even when no inmates are present. The repetition and unpredictability of these sounds contribute to a pervasive sense of unease, leaving witnesses convinced that they are not imagining what they hear. Whispers are also commonly reported in the abandoned cell blocks. Visitors and staff describe faint murmurs that seem to come from empty cells, sometimes calling out names, asking questions, or speaking in tones of despair. The whispers are often unintelligible, but their presence is undeniable, lingering in the air and fading only when the witness leaves the area. Paranormal investigators have recorded these voices using electronic voice phenomena (EVP) equipment, capturing faint, indistinct phrases that suggest the presence of lingering spirits. The whispers are particularly unsettling because they often seem to respond to movements or sounds, as if the spirits are aware of those who enter their domain. Shadowy figures are perhaps the most chilling manifestation at Fishkill. Staff and visitors have reported seeing dark shapes at the corners of their vision, figures that seem to watch from the shadows before disappearing when approached. Some witnesses describe full-bodied apparitions, pacing hallways or standing silently in cell blocks, their features obscured by darkness. In several accounts, these figures appear to resemble prisoners from decades past, wearing outdated clothing or uniforms. Officers have reported feeling a heavy presence in these moments, as though the figure exudes an invisible weight, pressing down on the air and the mind. Paranormal investigators have long been drawn to Fishkill because of the consistency and variety of reported phenomena. Using thermal imaging cameras, motion sensors, and audio recorders, researchers have documented cold spots moving independently through empty hallways, motion triggers in vacant cells, and whispers that appear on playback of recorded sessions. Some investigators have described a sense of being followed, a pressure on the shoulders, or an unexplainable heaviness in areas with a high concentration of reported activity. These sensations often coincide with sightings of shadows, footsteps, or the sounds of chains, reinforcing the idea that the facility is alive with echoes of the past. The history of Fishkill Correctional Facility provides context for its haunted reputation. Over the decades, countless men have served time within its walls, enduring strict routines, labor-intensive assignments, and periods of isolation. Some prisoners died while incarcerated, and others experienced intense fear, anger, or despair during their confinement. Paranormal experts suggest that such intense emotions can leave behind residual energy, creating echoes of the past that replay in specific locations. The older cell blocks, in particular, seem to retain these imprints, with activity most frequently reported in areas where suffering and confinement were concentrated. Staff members report that these experiences affect their perception of the facility. Some describe walking through a corridor and sensing a presence just beyond the corner of their eye. Others hear a whisper or the scrape of chains, only to find the hallway empty, leaving behind a feeling of dread. Inmates have occasionally reported similar experiences. Although the constant presence of other people in occupied cell blocks can mask some of the activity, nonetheless, the cumulative reports over decades suggest that Fishkill is a place where the echoes of past prisoners continue to linger, replaying their routines, fears, and final moments for those sensitive enough to notice. Even during the daytime, Fishkill carries the weight of its history. The stone walls seem to absorb sound, amplifying distant echoes and creaks. The long corridors create an oppressive atmosphere, and the cell blocks retain a feeling of confinement that seems to reach beyond the living. Visitors report sudden chills, unexplained sounds, and the occasional glimpse of a shadow moving just out of sight. These experiences reinforce the notion that the facility is not only a place of incarceration, but also a repository of lingering spirits and memories. Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York, is known for its long history, notorious inmates, and its position as one of the state's most secure prisons. Among its many sections, death row carries a reputation that is uniquely chilling. Over the decades, this wing has housed some of the most dangerous and condemned prisoners, men facing the ultimate sentence. It is within these walls that the energy is said to be heaviest, where the echoes of anguish, despair, and fear linger long after the living have left. Staff, visitors, and paranormal researchers have reported a range of strange phenomena, from anguished screams to ghostly apparitions, creating an atmosphere that is as oppressive as it is unforgettable. Death row is designed for maximum control and isolation. Each cell is compact, fortified with steel doors and reinforced concrete walls, ensuring inmates are kept under strict supervision. While modern security systems keep the living contained, some say they cannot contain the presence of the dead. Over the years, officers have reported hearing anguished screams emanating from empty cells. These cries are often described as raw and desperate, carrying a weight of emotion that is impossible to ignore. Many believe these sounds are the residual energy of prisoners reliving their final moments over and over, trapped by the intense fear and despair that accompanied their sentences. Shadowy figures are a recurring phenomenon in death row. Staff members recount seeing figures pacing silently in the corridors, disappearing when approached, only to reappear in a different location. These apparitions often resemble inmates wearing outdated prison uniforms, moving with a deliberate rhythm as though engaged in a routine that has persisted for decades. Witnesses frequently describe a sense of heaviness in the air during these encounters, an oppressive weight that presses on the chest and heightens the feeling of unease. Some officers have stated that they feel as though they are being watched constantly, the unseen eyes of past prisoners following their every move. Cold spots add another layer to the eerie reputation of death row. Inmates and staff have both reported sudden drops in temperature in certain cells or along specific hallways. The cold can be intense, leaving a physical sensation of icy fingers brushing along the skin. Paranormal investigators suggest that these pockets of chill are manifestations of spiritual energy, areas where the emotional imprint of past suffering has left a tangible mark on the environment. The cold often coincides with other phenomena, such as apparitions or sounds, creating an overwhelming sensory experience that is difficult to ignore. Unexplained noises are also common. Doors open and close without cause, metal clangs echo through the corridors, and sometimes there is the sound of chains dragging along the floor. Footsteps are heard pacing hallways where no one is present, and faint whispers float from cells that have long been empty. These occurrences are reported most frequently during the quiet hours of night, when the wing is largely deserted. Staff describe a growing tension in the air, a sensation that something unseen is present and aware of their movements. Even seasoned officers, accustomed to the routines of the prison, report feelings of unease that linger long after their shifts end. Paranormal researchers have visited death row repeatedly to document these phenomena, using electronic voice recorders, thermal imaging cameras, and motion sensors. They have captured evidence that supports the accounts of staff and visitors. EVPs reveal faint cries, murmurs, and occasional names being called out, as if the voices of the condemned are trying to communicate from beyond the grave. Thermal cameras sometimes detect cold areas moving through the hallways, forming shapes that resemble human figures. Motion sensors have been triggered in cells with no living presence, reinforcing the idea that the wing is inhabited by more than just memories. The history of death row helps explain the intensity of these experiences. Since its inception, this wing has been the site of numerous executions. Men condemned to death often spent years in confinement, enduring isolation, harsh routines, and the psychological torment of knowing their fate was sealed. Some died naturally, while others faced the execution chamber. Paranormal experts theorized that the combination of prolonged fear, despair, and suffering can leave an imprint on the environment, creating residual energy that manifests as the phenomena reported today. The intense emotions of those who faced the ultimate punishment appear to have embedded themselves into the very walls of the facility. We're playing for those sensitive enough to perceive them. Staff members working in death row reports that the presence of this energy can be difficult to ignore. Many describe the sensation of being followed, of footsteps mirroring their own, or feeling a sudden oppressive weight pressing on their shoulders. Some hear whispers or distant cries, even when the corridor is empty. Others report fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures moving in peripheral vision, only to vanish when directly observed. The cumulative effect of these experiences reinforces the idea that death row is not just a section of the prison, but a space where the emotional residue of past inmates continues to linger. Visitors to the facility often sense the same unsettling energy. Even during daytime tours, there are reports of sudden chills, faint whispers, and an overwhelming feeling of heaviness. The older sections, with their narrow corridors and reinforced cells, are said to carry the strongest residual energy. Some witnesses report hearing the echoes of long-past routines, the pacing of ghostly prisoners, or the anguished cries of men who faced execution decades ago. These experiences leave a lasting impression, conveying that death row is a place where time seems suspended and the past refuses to fade. Cell Block 1 of Rikers Island in New York City has long been regarded as one of the most unsettling areas within the sprawling correctional complex. While Rikers is notorious for housing a diverse range of inmates and maintaining strict security measures, Cell Block 1 has developed a reputation that reaches far beyond its practical function. Over the years, guards, staff, visitors, and paranormal researchers have reported a series of phenomena that suggest this section of the jail is home to more than just the living. Shadowy figures, doors opening and closing on their own, whispers echoing through empty hallways, and fleeting orbs of light captured on camera all contribute to an atmosphere thick with tension, dread, and the feeling that the past refuses to rest. The architecture of Cell Block 1 amplifies its eerie reputation. Long, narrow corridors lined with steel-barred cells, dim lighting, and concrete walls create a sense of confinement and isolation. For officers walking these halls, every sound echoes, every shadow seems to move, and every unexplained creak becomes magnified. The cell block houses inmates of varying security levels, yet even in the absence of prisoners, the space can feel alive, as if the walls themselves remember the footsteps, voices, and despair of those who came before. One of the most commonly reported phenomena is the presence of shadowy figures. Guards on night shifts frequently describe seeing dark silhouettes at the periphery of their vision. These shapes often move along the corridors, pacing silently or standing in the corners, vanishing when approached, only to reappear moments later in another location. Witnesses often describe a feeling of being watched during these encounters, a chilling sensation that intensifies as the figure lingers unseen. Some suggest these figures are residual imprints of past inmates, replaying fragments of their daily routines or moments of confinement long after their physical presence has disappeared. Doors opening and closing without explanation are also a frequent occurrence. Heavy cell doors swing open suddenly or slam shut, echoing through the empty hallways in ways that seem impossible to dismiss. Officers report pausing in mid-step, certain that someone must be nearby, only to find a corridor devoid of living presence. The unpredictability of these movements adds to the unease, making the mundane act of walking the hallways at night a source of anxiety. Paranormal investigators theorize that these door movements may be caused by lingering energy, the result of years of confinement, tension, and fear concentrated in the same physical spaces. Whispers in Cell Block 1 are perhaps the most unnerving of all phenomena. Guards and staff have reported hearing faint murmurs, sometimes repeating phrases, calling names, or carrying a tone of desperation. The voices often appear to emanate from empty cells or corridors where no one is present. Some witnesses describe the whispers as conversational, almost as if the spirits are speaking to one another or attempting to communicate with the living. These sounds are often fleeting and disappear when one tries to focus on them, leaving a lingering sense of uncertainty and dread. Paranormal recordings of the cell block have captured these whispers on multiple occasions, supporting the idea that the activity is not simply imagined. In addition to shadow figures, doors, and whispers, paranormal investigators frequently report unusual lights and noises. Orbs of light, moving unpredictably through the hallways or hovering near cell doors, have been documented on camera. These orbs often appear in the same areas where guards have previously reported shadowy figures or sudden temperature drops. Other unexplained noises, such as the scraping of metal, the faint dragging of objects, or distant thuds, are commonly reported. Officers and researchers alike describe a sense of the space reacting to their presence, a weight in the air that seems to press down physically and psychologically. The history of Cell Block 1 adds context to these reports. Rikers Island has been operational for decades, and its halls have seen countless inmates pass through, many under tense, sometimes violent conditions. Some prisoners suffered harsh treatment, endured solitary confinement, or experienced fear and despair on a daily basis. Others died within the facility, leaving behind memories of trauma, fear, and grief. Paranormal experts suggest that these intense emotional experiences can leave residual energy imprinted on the environment, creating echoes that manifest as shadowy figures, cold spots, whispers, and unexplained noises. Staff members who work in Cell Block 1 often report feeling a constant awareness of being watched, particularly during night shifts when the corridors are quiet and empty. Many describe a sudden heaviness in certain areas, a subtle pressure on their bodies, or a sense that someone is moving just beyond their line of sight. Inmates have occasionally reported unexplained sensations or fleeting glimpses of figures as well, though these experiences are less frequently documented due to the constant presence of living individuals in occupied cells. Visitors to Rikers Island, even during daytime tours or controlled visits, sometimes report a sense of unease in Cell Block 1. Sudden chills, the impression of unseen eyes following their movements, and fleeting glimpses of movement out of the corner of the eye contribute to the cell block's reputation as a haunted space. Even the most rational observers find themselves unnerved by the oppressive atmosphere and inexplicable sounds that seem to echo through the corridors. Despite the modernization of Rikers Island and ongoing security measures, Cell Block 1 retains its mysterious energy. Shadowy figures continue to appear, doors continue to move without explanation, whispers echo through empty corridors, and orbs of light are captured on film. Whether one interprets these events as the lingering presence of past inmates, residual energy imprinted on the building, or simply the power of suggestion, the experiences are consistent and unnerving. Cell Block 1 is not merely a section of a prison. It is a space where the past continues to manifest in the present, where the lives, fears, and experiences of countless inmates linger, and where the living cannot ignore the weight of history pressing silently from every corner. Greenhaven Correctional Facility in Stormville, New York, is already notorious for its strict security and long history. But Cell Block 3 holds a reputation that surpasses mere incarceration, known for repeated paranormal activity. This section of the prison has become a point of fascination for both staff and paranormal investigators. Within its walls, doors slam without warning, cold spots appear even during the hottest summer months, and spectral figures of inmates and guards alike have been reported. Many believe that the spirits in Cell Block 3 are trapped, endlessly reliving moments of fear, despair, and confinement, leaving the living to feel the weight of their lingering presence. The architecture of Cell Block 3 amplifies its eerie reputation. Long, narrow corridors lined with steel-barred cells, low ceilings, and cement walls create an environment where every sound echoes. Every shadow seems to move, and every corner conceals the possibility of the unknown. Officers walking the halls after dark often report an oppressive heaviness in the air, a sensation that intensifies as they move deeper into the block. Even when the wing is empty, the echoes of past inhabitants seem to linger, creating a sense that the building itself remembers. One of the most frequently reported phenomena in Cell Block 3 is the presence of spectral figures. Officers and maintenance personnel have described seeing shadowy figures of inmates pacing along hallways or standing silently in cell doorways. In some cases, these apparitions appear to wear outdated prison uniforms, suggesting that they may be the remnants of inmates from decades past. In addition to ghostly prisoners, some staff have reported seeing the faint outlines of guards, patrolling or standing at attention as if still bound to duty. Witnesses often describe a feeling of being watched during these encounters, a chilling sensation that seems to follow them even when the figures vanish. Cold spots are another hallmark of the paranormal activity in Cell Block 3. Staff have reported sudden drops in temperature, sometimes so intense that they can feel the chill in their bones, even during the peak of summer. These cold areas often appear in the middle of hallways or near specific cells, and they seem to move independently, shifting location unpredictably. Paranormal investigators suggest that these cold spots may be manifestations of residual energy created by the intense fear, suffering, and despair that once permeated the block. In some accounts, the chill is accompanied by an overwhelming sense of sorrow, as if the emotions of long-dead inmates are lingering in the air. Doors slamming without cause is a consistent feature of Cell Block 3. Heavy, steel doors swing open or shut with alarming force, echoing through the empty corridors. Officers have reported pausing in their tracks, convinced someone must be nearby, only to find the area entirely empty. These occurrences can be startling, especially in the late hours of the night when the prison is quiet. The unpredictability of door movements adds to the feeling that the block is alive with unseen activity, a space where the boundary between the living and the dead has grown thin. Whispers are frequently reported throughout Cell Block 3. Staff members often hear faint murmurs drifting from empty cells, sometimes calling names or repeating phrases. The whispers are elusive, disappearing whenever one tries to focus on them, yet their presence is undeniable. Some visitors have reported that the voices seem to respond to their movements, as though the spirits are aware of the living intruding in their domain. Paranormal recordings of the block have captured these murmurs, adding credibility to eyewitness accounts and suggesting that the phenomena are more than mere imagination. Shadow figures, cold spots, slamming doors, and whispers are often accompanied by other strange occurrences. Footsteps echo along corridors with no living occupants. Objects are occasionally found displaced, and some officers report feeling a sudden weight on their shoulders or an inexplicable pressure in the chest. Investigators have also captured fleeting orbs of light on camera, moving unpredictably through hallways or hovering near cells. These phenomena create an environment where the ordinary sense of time and space feels distorted, as though the past and present are overlapping. The history of Cell Block 3 contributes to its haunted reputation. For decades, this section of Green Haven has housed inmates under strict supervision, many of whom endured long sentences, harsh routines, and the psychological stress of confinement. Some prisoners died within the block, while others experienced extreme fear or trauma during their time there. Paranormal experts theorize that the intense emotions generated by these experiences can leave a residual imprint on the physical environment, causing the recurring activity reported today. The spectral figures, cold spots, and whispers may be echoes of that past, replaying moments of suffering and despair for those sensitive enough to perceive them. Staff who work in Cell Block 3 describe a heightened awareness of their surroundings. Many officers report sensing a presence just beyond their line of sight, hearing footsteps that do not belong to the living, or feeling a heavy energy in the air. Some have shared stories of seeing figures move with purpose, only to vanish when approached, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. Inmates have occasionally reported similar experiences, though the constant presence of others may mask some of the activity. Nevertheless, the recurring reports from staff, visitors, and investigators over the years reinforce the perception that Cell Block 3 is a place of restless spirits. Even during daytime operations, the energy of Cell Block 3 can be felt. The long corridors echo with every footstep, the low ceilings trap sound, and the heavy doors amplify each movement. Visitors report sudden chills, fleeting glimpses of shadows, and the unsettling sensation of being watched. The older sections of the block, in particular, seem to retain the strongest residual energy, carrying the emotional weight of generations of inmates and the staff who oversaw them. Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, located in Bedford, New York, is widely known for being a high-security women's prison, but the maximum security wing carries a reputation that goes beyond its role as a correctional institution. Over the decades, countless stories have emerged of ghostly apparitions, unexplained noises, and the lingering presence of spirits within its corridors. Staff, visitors, and paranormal researchers have all reported phenomena that suggest the maximum security wing is haunted by former inmates, replaying the sorrow, fear, and despair that once filled the halls. The architecture of the maximum security wing contributes to its unsettling atmosphere. Narrow, echoing corridors are flanked by rows of steel-barred cells, and the low ceilings and thick concrete walls trap sound and create a sense of confinement. Even during the day, the hallways can feel oppressive, but at night, when the facility is largely empty, the space seems to carry the memories of its past inhabitants. Footsteps echo down the corridors, yet often no one is present, and the faint sound of sobbing or whispering can drift through the air, chilling anyone who hears it. Ghostly apparitions are among the most frequently reported phenomena in this wing. Staff members have described seeing figures of women in outdated prison uniforms pacing silently along hallways or sitting motionless in cells. These apparitions often appear to be lost in thought, staring at nothing, as if trapped between the past and the present. Some witnesses report that the figures seem unaware of the living presence nearby, while others describe an unsettling sensation of being observed, as if the spirits are watching from behind unseen eyes. In some cases, multiple apparitions have been seen simultaneously, moving with slow, deliberate movements that mimic the daily routines of inmates long gone. Sobbing is another commonly reported experience. Staff and visitors often hear faint cries echoing through empty corridors, the sound filled with sadness and despair. The sobbing can occur at any time, though it is most commonly reported during night shifts when the halls are silent and the wing is deserted. Some staff describe the sound as heartbreaking, leaving them with a lingering sense of sorrow that remains even after the sound fades. Paranormal investigators have theorized that these cries may be residual echoes, moments of intense emotional pain replaying endlessly in the cells where the original events occurred. Whispers are frequently reported alongside the sobbing. These voices often appear unintelligible, drifting through the corridors or emanating from individual cells. Some witnesses report hearing their own names being called, while others hear fragments of conversations, as if the spirits are communicating among themselves. The whispers can be fleeting and vanish the moment someone tries to focus on them, creating an eerie sense of elusiveness. Recorded evidence using electronic voice phenomena, EVP equipment, has captured faint murmurs, supporting the accounts of staff and suggesting that the voices are more than imagination or fatigue. Footsteps are another hallmark of the wing's paranormal activity. They echo along hallways where no one walks, pacing in rhythmic patterns that suggest the presence of someone moving from cell to cell. Staff on patrol have reported feeling a pressure in the air or a subtle vibration in the floor as the footsteps pass, though no living person is present. In some instances, these sounds are accompanied by the appearance of shadowy figures, as if the footsteps are the spectral manifestation of the former inmates themselves. The history of Bedford Hill's maximum security adds context to its haunting reputation. Over decades, this wing has held women serving long sentences, many under strict supervision and harsh routines. Deaths and serious illnesses have also occurred within the wing, leaving behind a residue of sorrow and trauma. Paranormal experts theorize that such intense emotions can imprint themselves on the environment, creating what is sometimes referred to as residual energy. This energy may replay moments of despair, manifesting as apparitions, whispers, sobbing, or unexplained movements. Staff who work in the maximum security wing often report a sense of unease that cannot be ignored. Many describe walking down a corridor and suddenly feeling watched, or hearing a whisper that seems to come from nowhere. Others report seeing a figure sitting silently in a cell, staring into space, only to vanish moments later. Even those who are skeptical admit that the cumulative weight of these experiences creates an oppressive atmosphere, one that lingers long after they leave the wing. Visitors to Bedford Hills have occasionally reported similar phenomena. Some describe feeling sudden chills when entering empty hallways, or a sense of heaviness that presses down physically and psychologically. Shadows at the corners of their vision, faint murmurs, and the occasional glimpse of an apparition contribute to the wing's reputation as a haunted space. Many who experience these phenomena describe a feeling that the past is actively present, a residual memory of the women who once lived, suffered, and struggled within these walls. Even routine tasks within the wing can become unsettling under these conditions. Officers may hear doors swing open or close without cause, or objects appear slightly moved after rounds. Some report that the sounds and movements intensify at night, reinforcing the idea that the maximum security wing carries a memory of its former inhabitants that is particularly active after hours. Paranormal investigators have documented cold spots, EVP recordings of whispers, and fleeting orbs of light, all contributing to the evidence that the space holds more than the living can see. Despite modern procedures and security measures, Bedford Hill's maximum security remains a place where the past lingers. Apparitions continue to pace the halls, sobbing echoes through empty corridors. Whispers drift from cells, and staff feel the unmistakable weight of history pressing down on them. Whether interpreted as restless spirits or residual energy, the experiences are undeniable. The maximum security wing is a place where memory, sorrow, and despair seem to replay endlessly, leaving anyone who enters with a chilling impression that the lives of those who came before are still very much present. Clinton Annex Death Row in Dannemora, New York, is a section of the prison shrouded in darkness, both literal and figurative. While the facility itself is known for housing higher-risk inmates under strict supervision, the Death Row Annex carries a reputation that extends beyond ordinary confinement. Over the years, visitors, staff, and paranormal investigators have reported a range of eerie phenomena that suggest the presence of spirits lingering long after the inmates themselves have passed. Ghostly figures pacing the hallways, doors moving without explanation, whispers calling names, and the sounds of chains dragging or faint screams all contribute to an atmosphere of unease, leaving those who enter with the sense that Death Row has not fully released its hold on the living. The architecture of Clint Annex's Death Row intensifies its haunted reputation. Narrow, echoing corridors lined with steel-barred cells create a claustrophobic environment. The low ceilings and thick concrete walls amplify every sound, from footsteps to the creaking of doors, making even minor noises unnervingly loud. Officers walking these hallways at night often describe a sensation of oppression, a heaviness that seems to press down from the walls themselves. In this environment, every shadow can appear to move, and every distant sound takes on a sinister quality, reinforcing the feeling that the past and present are intertwined. Ghostly figures are a frequent occurrence on Death Row. Staff members have reported seeing shadowy inmates pacing silently along the hallways, often stopping as if to observe the living before vanishing into thin air. Some apparitions appear in full uniform from decades past, suggesting that these are echoes of prisoners who once lived and died within the walls. In addition to spectral inmates, several staff members have claimed to see faint figures of guards moving along the corridors, performing their duties as though still bound to the routines of the living world. These sightings are often accompanied by an overwhelming sense of being watched, a feeling that can linger long after the figures disappear. Doors opening and closing on their own are another hallmark of the death row annex. Heavy steel doors swing abruptly without warning, echoing through the empty hallways in ways that defy explanation. Officers describe moments when they pause, convinced someone must be nearby, only to find the corridor completely empty. These movements are not limited to a single location. They occur throughout the annex, reinforcing the impression that unseen entities are still moving within the prison. Paranormal investigators suggest that these events may be the result of residual energy from decades of confinement, fear, and despair, manifesting in physical form. Whispers are among the most unnerving phenomena reported on death row. Staff and visitors often hear their names being called softly from the darkness, or faint murmurs drifting from empty cells. The voices can be fleeting, vanishing when one tries to focus, yet their presence is undeniable. Some have reported hearing fragments of conversations, as though spirits are speaking to one another, while others describe the whispers as urgent or pleading, echoing the emotions of those who once faced execution. Recordings taken during investigations have captured faint voices and murmurs, supporting eyewitness accounts and adding to the aura of mystery surrounding the annex. The sounds of chains dragging and faint screams are frequently reported by staff and paranormal researchers alike. Heavy metal scraping across the concrete floor, often followed by the echo of footsteps, has been heard in multiple areas of the annex. Occasionally, these sounds are accompanied by faint cries or anguished screams that seem to originate from empty cells. Investigators using electronic equipment have captured audio resembling chains moving, though no human presence was ever recorded. These sounds contribute to the pervasive sense of unease, as though the pain and confinement of the past continue to manifest audibly for the living. The history of Clinton Annex death row helps explain why these phenomena may persist. For decades, men condemned to die spent their final days within this wing, many experiencing prolonged confinement. Intense fear and the emotional strain of knowing their fate was inevitable. Some inmates died naturally, while others faced execution, leaving behind a potent legacy of trauma and despair. Paranormal experts theorize that these extreme emotions can leave a lasting imprint on the environment, creating residual energy that manifests as ghostly figures, sounds, and sensations for those who enter. The intense psychological weight of death row appears to have left an indelible mark, replaying moments of fear and anguish for anyone sensitive enough to perceive it. Staff members often describe the psychological impact of working in the death row annex. Many recount moments when they feel a presence just beyond their line of sight or hear footsteps echoing down hallways that are completely empty. Some report sudden chills, feelings of pressure on their shoulders, or a sense of being followed as they walk the corridors. Even seasoned officers admit that the oppressive atmosphere of the annex can be unnerving, a reminder that the living are not the only occupants of the space. Visitors to the annex have occasionally reported similar experiences. Sudden cold spots, fleeting shadows, and unexplained whispers contribute to the feeling that the area is alive with residual energy. Paranormal researchers, using motion detectors and thermal cameras, have documented unusual readings in specific locations, often corresponding to areas where staff report the most consistent activity. EVP recordings frequently capture faint murmurs, moans, or indistinct phrases, lending further evidence that the annex may be haunted by more than just memory. Even in the daytime, the annex carries a weight that cannot be ignored. The echoing corridors, heavy doors, and confined spaces amplify any sound, while the oppressive energy seems to linger in the air. apparitions continue to pace, whispers float through empty cells, and chains scrape across concrete floors without explanation. The cumulative effect of these phenomena creates an environment where the past feels ever present, and where the line between the living and the dead is blurred. The oldest cell blocks of Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Auburn, New York, are steeped in history and shadowed by stories of intense spectral activity. While the prison itself has long been known as one of the most notorious correctional institutions in the United States, these historic cell blocks carry a reputation that stretches beyond the living inmates and staff. Witnesses consistently report shadowy figures pacing the hallways, doors slamming without explanation, and sudden, chilling cold spots that make the hair on the back of the neck stand on end. Paranormal researchers, guards, and visitors alike have suggested that these occurrences are manifestations of the prison's long, dark history, with some even claiming to witness past inmates replaying their daily routines as though trapped in time. Walking through the corridors of the old cell blocks is an unnerving experience, even for those who have spent years inside prisons. Narrow hallways lined with rusted steel bars, low ceilings, and concrete walls create an oppressive atmosphere. Every sound, footsteps, doors swinging, or a distant echo resonates through the confined space, magnifying even the smallest noises. Staff members working late-night shifts often describe a heavy feeling of being watched, an almost tangible presence that follows them from cell to cell. It is in these narrow, echoing passages that the majority of reported paranormal activity occurs. Shadowy figures are perhaps the most commonly reported phenomenon in these cell blocks. Officers and visitors alike have described seeing dark silhouettes pacing the hallways or standing silently in doorways. Some figures appear to wear outdated prison uniforms, suggesting they may be the spectral remnants of inmates from decades past. These apparitions often seem oblivious to the presence of the living, moving with deliberate routines as if caught in a loop. In some accounts, figures have been seen performing mundane prison activities, walking between cells, sitting quietly on benches, or performing cleaning tasks only to vanish when approached. The repetition of these behaviors has led many to believe that the old cell blocks are acting as a stage where the past is perpetually replayed. Doors opening and slamming on their own are a frequent occurrence in the old sections of Sing Sing. Heavy steel doors swing open or shut abruptly, echoing through the hallways with alarming force. Officers on patrol have often stopped in their tracks, convinced someone must be nearby, only to find the corridor completely empty. The randomness and unpredictability of these events create a sense of constant vigilance, making even routine rounds tense and unsettling. Paranormal investigators speculate that these door movements may be physical manifestations of residual energy left behind by the countless prisoners who lived, suffered, and, in some cases, died in these cell blocks. Cold spots are another common feature of the paranormal activity in Sing Sing's historic cell. Witnesses report sudden drops in temperature, sometimes accompanied by a sensation of a heavy chill that seems to press down on the body. These cold areas can appear in the middle of hallways, inside individual cells, or near stairwells, and often have no discernible source. In many cases, the cold is so intense that it causes a physical reaction: shivers, goosebumps, or even a feeling of nausea. Paranormal experts suggest that these cold spots may indicate the presence of spirits or residual energy, as the intense emotional experiences of past inmates could leave lasting impressions on the physical environment. Whispers and indistinct murmurs also frequently accompany these events. Staff have reported hearing names being called, fragments of conversations, or soft, sorrowful voices drifting through empty corridors. Some have claimed that the whispers respond to movement, as though the spirits are aware of the living intruding in their space. Others report hearing repetitive phrases that seem to reflect the routines and rules of daily prison life, adding to the feeling that the cell blocks are trapped in a perpetual echo of their past. Paranormal recordings in the old cell blocks have captured faint voices and murmurs, lending credibility to these accounts. The historic nature of these cell blocks is central to understanding their haunting reputation. Built in the 19th century, they have witnessed generations of inmates living under strict discipline, enduring harsh punishments, and experiencing intense psychological stress. Many prisoners died within these walls, while others endured extreme isolation or punishment that left lasting emotional scars. Paranormal experts argue that the intensity of these experiences can leave behind residual energy, a kind of imprint that repeats moments of fear, suffering, or daily routine long after the original inhabitants are gone. Even the most skeptical staff members admit that the old cell blocks have a unique and oppressive energy. Many describe an almost immediate change in atmosphere when entering, a weight that settles in the chest, and an awareness of unseen eyes observing every step. Some officers report seeing fleeting shadows at the corners of their vision or hearing footsteps echoing along hallways where no one is present. Others have witnessed objects slightly displaced, as though moved by an invisible hand. For those who spend long periods of time in these areas, the cumulative effect can be profoundly unsettling. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts are drawn to the old cell blocks for both their history and their eerie reputation. Many report sudden chills, shadowy movements, or whispers drifting through the halls. Others claim to have seen full figures repeating daily prison routines, walking through corridors as if the years between them and the present do not exist. The consistency of these reports over decades has made the old cell blocks one of the most notorious paranormal hotspots within Sing Sing. Despite modernization and active security protocols, the energy within the historic cell blocks continues to persist. Doors slam without cause, cold spots appear unexpectedly, whispers echo through the corridors, and shadowy figures continue to pace the hallways. Whether interpreted as the residual presence of past inmates, restless spirits, or simply the weight of memory, the experiences are undeniable. These cell blocks serve as a chilling reminder that some spaces retain the imprints of their history, and that within the walls of Sing Sing, the past is never truly gone. Rikers Island, located in the East River between Queens and the Bronx, is one of the largest correctional facilities in the world, and its maximum security section carries a reputation that extends far beyond its role in housing the city's most dangerous inmates. Over decades, stories of paranormal activity have emerged from this wing, describing phantom prisoners walking silently through hallways, doors slamming without explanation, and sudden drops in temperature that send shivers through anyone nearby. Staff, visitors, and paranormal researchers alike have reported eerie cries echoing through the halls at night, creating an atmosphere that suggests the past never truly leaves this section of the prison. The architecture of Rikers Island, maximum security, amplifies its unsettling nature. Long, narrow corridors lined with steel-barred cells, heavy concrete walls, and low ceilings create a confined and echoing environment. Every sound resonates, from footsteps to the distant hum of ventilation, making the building itself feel alive. Guards patrolling the hallways often describe a heavy, almost tangible sense of being watched, a presence that seems to linger just beyond the edge of perception. Even when the corridors are empty, many report feeling an oppressive weight, as though the emotional residue of decades of fear, despair, and confinement has settled into the very walls. Phantom prisoners are a frequent occurrence in this maximum security section. Officers and staff have reported seeing dark silhouettes pacing silently through hallways or standing in the shadows of cells. Some figures appear fully formed, wearing uniforms reminiscent of past decades, suggesting these are echoes of inmates long gone. Witnesses often describe the apparitions as moving with purpose, walking as if fulfilling the routines of daily prison life, only to vanish when approached. Others report seeing figures sitting silently in cells, staring at nothing, their gaze empty but somehow aware, creating an unsettling sense of observation. These spectral inmates seem to embody the weight of confinement, their presence a constant reminder of the prison's darker history. Doors slamming unexpectedly is another hallmark of the paranormal activity at Rikers maximum security. Heavy steel doors swing open or shut with a force that echoes through the corridors, startling anyone nearby. Officers often pause, convinced someone is nearby, only to find the hallways completely empty. These occurrences can happen at any time of day, though they are particularly frequent during night shifts when the prison is quiet and shadows dominate the hallways. Paranormal investigators suggest that these door movements may be physical manifestations of residual energy, the imprint of the intense emotions and psychological strain experienced by past inmates. Sudden drops in temperature are commonly reported throughout the maximum security wing. Staff members describe walking down corridors in the middle of summer, only to be enveloped by icy gusts that seem to come from nowhere. These cold spots often appear in cell blocks, near stairwells, or in isolated hallways. Sometimes following the movements of the witness, the chills can be accompanied by a sensation of heaviness or unease, as if the energy of the past is pressing down on those present. Paranormal experts often interpret these cold spots as a sign of spirit activity or residual energy, a tangible manifestation of the fear, isolation, and despair endured by past inmates. Faint cries and moans are another unsettling phenomenon frequently reported in this wing. Staff and visitors alike have heard sorrowful wails drifting from empty cells or echoing along deserted corridors. Some describe the cries as fragmented, as though replaying moments of anguish or fear, while others hear them as continuous, mournful tones that fill the space with an almost unbearable emotional weight. Paranormal recordings have captured these sounds in several areas, lending credence to the reports and suggesting that the echoes of suffering persist in the prison's atmosphere. The history of Rikers Island maximum security helps explain its haunted reputation. For decades, this wing has housed the city's most dangerous and high-risk inmates under strict surveillance and severe routines. Many prisoners endured extended periods of isolation, intense psychological stress, and, in some cases, violence or punishment. Deaths and severe illnesses also occurred within the corridors, leaving a legacy of intense emotion and trauma. Paranormal experts theorize that the magnitude of these experiences can leave a residual imprint on the physical environment, causing repeated manifestations such as phantom figures, unexplained sounds, and chilling sensations. Staff members who work in this section of Rikers frequently describe a heightened sense of awareness when patrolling the hallways. Many recount moments when footsteps echo in areas they just passed, doors move without explanation, or shadows appear in their peripheral vision. Some have reported hearing whispered voices, calling names, or murmuring unintelligible phrases. These experiences are often accompanied by the sensation of being observed, an oppressive awareness that can linger long after a shift ends. Even officers with years of experience admit that the atmosphere of the maximum security wing is unlike any other section of the facility. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts are drawn to the wing's reputation as a hotspot for unexplained activity. They report sudden chills, shadowy movements, and eerie cries that seem to emerge from empty cells. Some have witnessed figures walking silently along corridors or sitting in cells, replaying routines from decades past. Motion detectors, thermal cameras, and EVP equipment have all captured anomalous readings in these areas, often corresponding with locations where staff consistently reports activity. These findings suggest that the phenomena are persistent and not merely products of imagination. Even during daylight hours, the maximum security wing retains a palpable sense of the past. Corridors echo with every footstep, doors swing and creak unpredictably, and cold spots appear without cause. Apparitions continue to pace hallways or sit silently in cells, while faint cries echo in the background. For those who spend time within these walls, the presence of past inmates is undeniable. The maximum security section of Rikers Island is more than a functional correctional space. It is a place where memory, fear, and suffering seem to linger, creating an environment in which the past and present collide. The oldest cell blocks of Greenhaven Correctional Facility in Stormville, New York, have long been the source of unsettling reports and paranormal activity. While Greenhaven is a modern prison with strict security measures, its historic sections retain an eerie presence that seems to defy time. Shadowy figures in outdated uniforms, sudden cold drafts, whispers of anguish, and inexplicable movements of objects have all been reported within these aging walls. Doors swing open without warning, footsteps echo in empty corridors, and visitors and staff alike often feel the oppressive weight of past inmates' suffering. These phenomena have made the old cell blocks of Green Haven one of the most haunted areas of the facility, drawing both intrigue and fear from those who enter. Walking through the corridors of the oldest cell blocks is an experience few forget. Narrow passageways, lined with steel-barred cells and thick concrete walls, create an environment where every sound resonates unnervingly. Footsteps echo for long distances, and even the slightest movement can produce a sudden, startling clatter. Staff working late-night shifts report a constant feeling of being watched, an unseen presence lurking just beyond their line of sight. Shadows seem to move at the corners of vision, vanishing when one attempts to focus, and an inexplicable heaviness often settles over the hallways, leaving an almost tangible sense of dread. Shadowy figures are among the most commonly reported manifestations in these old cell blocks. Officers and visitors have described seeing dark silhouettes pacing the hallways or standing silently in doorways. Witnesses often describe the figures as moving deliberately, sometimes mimicking the routines of daily prison life. Apparitions may be seen walking between cells, sitting on benches, or standing in silent contemplation, only to vanish when approached. The repeated sightings suggest that these entities are replaying moments from their past, trapped in a liminal space between life and death. Cold drafts are another signature of the paranormal activity in Green Haven's historic sections. Witnesses report sudden drops in temperature that seem to come from nowhere, chilling the body even in the middle of summer. These cold spots often appear in hallways, inside cells, or near stairwells, sometimes following the movements of those present. Paranormal experts believe these cold drafts may indicate the presence of spirits or residual energy, as intense emotional experiences, fear, despair, and isolation can leave imprints on the environment that manifests physically for the living. Whispers of anguish are also frequently reported within the oldest cell blocks. Staff have recounted hearing faint murmurs, fragmented phrases, or cries of distress drifting through empty corridors. Some describe hearing their own names called softly, while others report unintelligible whispers echoing from cells that have long been vacant. Paranormal investigators using electronic voice phenomena (EVP) equipment have captured faint voices, lending credibility to these reports. These whispers are often described as sad or pleading, as though the spirits are trapped in the emotional pain of their past lives, unable to find release. Objects moving without explanation add another layer of mystery to the old cell blocks. Personal items, pieces of furniture, and even doors have been reported as moving independently without any human intervention. Staff have seen benches shift slightly, papers flutter on tables, and doors creak open or slam shut while the hallways remain empty. These occurrences often coincide with other paranormal activity, such as cold drafts or shadowy figures, reinforcing the impression that the environment itself is influenced by the lingering presence of past inmates. The historical context of these cell blocks helps explain their haunted reputation. Built decades ago, they housed prisoners under strict discipline and harsh conditions. Many endured isolation, punishment, or severe emotional strain, leaving behind a legacy of fear and despair. Deaths and serious illnesses occurred within these walls, adding to the potent emotional energy embedded in the structure. Paranormal experts theorize that intense emotions experienced by inmates can imprint themselves onto the environment, creating residual energy that manifests as shadowy figures, cold spots, whispers, or moving objects. Staff working in the oldest cell blocks often describe a heightened sense of alertness and unease. Officers walking the corridors report feeling a presence that follows them, footsteps that echo from empty hallways, and shadows flickering at the corners of their vision. Some have experienced inexplicable chills or the sensation of being touched by an unseen hand. Even those accustomed to working in high-security environments note that these occurrences are distinct, carrying an emotional weight that is difficult to explain. Visitors to the facility have occasionally reported similar experiences. Some feel sudden drops in temperature or a presence nearby that cannot be seen. Others claim to have witnessed fleeting apparitions, moving through hallways or sitting silently in cells. Many describe an overwhelming sense of sadness, as though the collective anguish of past inmates remains trapped in the walls. Motion detectors, thermal cameras, and EVP recordings have captured anomalies consistent with these reports, reinforcing the idea that the oldest cell blocks harbor more than memories. They house a lingering presence. Despite modernization and strict security measures, the historic cell blocks retain a haunting quality that cannot be ignored. Shadowy figures continue to pace hallways, doors move without cause, cold spots appear unexpectedly, and whispers echo through empty corridors. Paranormal activity seems particularly concentrated in areas associated with suffering or confinement, suggesting a connection between past experiences and current phenomena. These spaces provide a stark reminder that the history of the prison is never fully erased and that the emotional imprint of decades of incarceration remains. Auburn Correctional Facility in Auburn, New York, is one of the oldest prisons in the United States, and its historic wing is a place steeped in both history and legend. While the prison continues to operate, the oldest sections retain an atmosphere unlike any modern facility. The historic wing is filled with the echoes of the past, and over the years, visitors, staff, and paranormal researchers have reported a range of unexplained phenomena: ghostly figures pacing hallways, disembodied footsteps, sudden chills, whispering voices, and cold spots in areas abandoned for decades. All contribute to the reputation of Auburn's historic wing as one of the most haunted sections of the prison. Walking through the historic wing is an unnerving experience. The narrow hallways, lined with steel-barred cells and thick stone walls, create an oppressive environment. Low ceilings and long corridors amplify every sound, turning even small noises into echoes that resonate through the building. Staff members often report feeling watched, a sensation that persists even in empty corridors. Shadows seem to flit at the edges of vision, only to vanish when approached. The combined effect of the architecture and the long history of confinement creates an atmosphere where the past feels alive, and the weight of decades of imprisonment hangs heavily in the air. Ghostly figures are a common occurrence in the historic wing. Visitors and staff alike have reported seeing shadowy silhouettes moving through hallways or standing silently inside cells. Many of these apparitions appear in old prison uniforms, suggesting they are remnants of inmates who lived and died within the facility. Witnesses describe the figures as moving with purpose, repeating daily routines or pacing back and forth in the hallways as if caught in an endless loop. Some have seen apparitions sitting quietly on benches or in their cells, staring at nothing, their gaze empty yet filled with a palpable sense of sorrow and despair. These sightings often leave witnesses shaken, with a feeling that the prison's history is replaying itself in spectral form. Disembodied footsteps are another hallmark of paranormal activity in Auburn's historic wing. Staff members have reported hearing the sound of boots striking the floor, often echoing down corridors where no one is present. These footsteps sometimes appear to follow observers, creating the unnerving sensation of being stalked by an unseen presence. Other times, they seem to march in unison, as if a line of phantom prisoners is moving silently through the hallways. Even seasoned officers, familiar with the creaks and groans of an old building, describe these sounds as distinct and inexplicable, contributing to the wing's haunted reputation. Sudden chills are frequently reported throughout the historic wing. Visitors and staff alike have experienced icy gusts of wind that appear in the middle of a hallway or inside a cell, often without any source. These cold spots can cause shivers, goosebumps, or a sensation of heaviness, as though the atmosphere itself is pressing down. Paranormal investigators suggest that these chills are a manifestation of residual energy, a physical imprint of the intense fear, despair, and emotional strain endured by inmates over the decades. The cold is often accompanied by other phenomena, such as whispering voices or fleeting shadows, amplifying the sense of unease. Whispering voices are among the most unsettling aspects of the haunting in Auburn's historic wing. Staff have described hearing faint murmurs, fragments of conversation, or names being called softly from empty cells. Paranormal researchers recording in the wing have captured electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, faint voices and phrases that appear on playback, despite no living presence in the room at the time. These whispers are often described as pleading, sorrowful, or urgent, and they seem to echo the emotional experiences of the inmates who once lived there. The voices frequently accompany other activity, including footsteps, cold spots, or the appearance of shadowy figures. Objects moving without explanation further contribute to the sense of the supernatural. Doors have been reported to open or close suddenly. Benches have shifted slightly, and papers or personal items have been displaced with no human intervention. Staff members recount moments when they walked past a cell or hallway and noticed objects in new positions, only to return later and find them back where they were originally, or moved again. These events, combined with the other phenomena, reinforce the impression that the historic wing is a space where the past refuses to remain buried. The history of Auburn's historic wing is integral to understanding its haunted reputation. Built in the 19th century, it housed inmates under harsh conditions, including strict discipline and extended periods of confinement. Punishments and extreme isolation were common, and many prisoners died within its walls. The intense emotions, fear, and suffering of those who lived and sometimes perished there appear to have left a lasting imprint on the environment. Paranormal experts suggest that such residual energy can manifest as ghostly apparitions, sounds, and cold spots, creating the consistent reports of haunting that persist to this day. Staff working in the historic wing often report a heightened sense of awareness and unease. Officers patrolling the hallways describe feeling an unseen presence, hearing footsteps in empty corridors, or catching shadows moving at the periphery of vision. Some have felt sudden chills, or the sensation of being touched or watched, even in well-lit areas. Longtime staff admit that the historic wing carries an energy unlike any other part of the facility, an oppressive weight of history and emotion that can affect even the most experienced personnel. Visitors and paranormal enthusiasts are often drawn to Auburn's historic wing because of its haunted reputation. Many report sudden temperature drops, fleeting shadows, whispering voices, or seeing apparitions performing daily routines from the past. Motion detectors, thermal cameras, and EVP equipment frequently capture anomalies consistent with eyewitness reports, suggesting that these experiences are not merely products of imagination. Even during the day, the historic wing retains a palpable presence of the past. Shadowy figures continue to pace, doors move without cause, cold spots appear unexpectedly, and faint whispers echo through the corridors. The combined effect of these phenomena creates an environment where history feels alive, and where the emotional echoes of past inmates continue to resonate. And there you have it, 25 haunted prisons in New York, where the walls whisper, shadows linger, and the restless spirits of inmates refuse to rest. These penitentiaries remind us that the echoes of human suffering can linger for centuries, haunting corridors long after the last cell doors closed. If this journey into the haunted halls of New York gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss another ghostly tale. Until next time, tread carefully, and remember, some walls speak if you dare to listen.